All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the second portion of today's Epic Symposium. Hopefully y'all had a nice chance to grab a bite, get some coffee. We do still have some coffee and pastries outside if you'd like a little snack, although there is no food and drink in this auditorium. So you'll have to enjoy that outside. We're about to next start our plenary session for those in person and online. That'll be focused on battery safety future-proofing. But before we begin, I'd like to play another video from one of our EPIC grant recipients, this time from UC Davis and the California Lighting and Technology Center.
Yeah, many communities face unsafe, outdated exterior lighting powered by carbon-intensive energy. This problem becomes especially severe at night when renewable energy generation is low. Aging infrastructure, high maintenance costs, and frequent power shutoffs often leave low-income neighborhoods in the dark. The California Lighting Technology Center at UC Davis is tackling this challenge with renewable energy and advanced lighting systems, also known as REAL, developed with support from the California Energy Commission's EPIC program. REAL combines hybrid solar grid power, battery storage, and advanced energy-efficient lighting technologies designed for community safety and sustainability. These features ensure reliable lighting even during low renewable generation hours or planned shutoffs, making streets safer and residents feel more secure. And the results speak for themselves. At a park where REAL lighting was recently installed, most residents agreed that the new systems improved visual comfort, increased their sense of safety when walking alone at night, and enhanced nighttime driving conditions with the retrofitted lights. We're grateful for the support of the EPIC program, which makes it possible to bring more sustainable lighting to communities across California.
All right. And then, we, again, continue to show these videos to demonstrate just the diversity of projects within our portfolio and really highlighting some of the energy, but also non-energy benefits. With that, we'll be transitioning to our next panel, and I'd like to invite to the stage our moderator, Eric Wu, Program Manager in the Safety and Enforcement Division at the California Public Utilities Commission, and the panelists.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, welcome back to the EPIC Symposium. I hope that we will have a very vivid discussion for you to enjoy after your lunch. So first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Eric Wu. I'm the Program Manager of Electric Safety and Reliability Branch at Safety and Enforcement Division at CPUC. So our primary responsibility is actually to provide an audit to the electric infrastructure and generation. And earlier this year, that we were tasked with the audit and investigation to the energy storage system, and we have a wonderful team of doing this. Today, join me in this symposium. I have our supervisor, Banil Asimas. Can you please raise your hand? And also the great team member, Ryan Hart, here to support our discussion. And as you know, that California is really devoted a lot of resources into the mitigating the climate change and also protecting our environment. And we are aiming to have the retail sale of the electricity of 100% from the renewable energy and the energy storage systems. And we are hoping to achieve this goal by 2045. And to do so, that energy storage system become very important portion of our life and also for the future energy mapping. So just give you some perspective of how many energy storage system we have and why we have this panel to talk about this is that, back to year 2009, there are about 500 megawatts of energy storage capacity. Up to 2014, it became 13,300 megawatts of storage capacity. And what we are looking into in the year 2045, that we'll be expecting about 52,000 megawatts of that storage capacity to support our greener California. What it means to us is that from today, we'll be seeing about 300% growth of the number of energy storage systems from what we have today. So I think that put a perspective of how important it is to have the energy storage system. But what's more important is that we want to have a safety battery storage system, safe battery storage system. You must have heard about some incident that happened in the Mars landing, and we don't want to go back to review the cases of that. But from the community, from the public, that the more safer, the safer it is for energy storage system, the better that a community can accept the concept of the energy storage system. So that's why we are having this discussion today. So today, as I mentioned, that it's really my honor to be here to be the moderator for this session, and we have a very distinguished panelists here. They all are recipients of the grant from CEC, and I will just briefly introduce the company, and they will go on to talk about the project, provide you the update, and talk about the technology they are developing, which we had this discussion during lunchtime, and they were so impressive, and I want you also enjoy this very much. So first of all, the person right next to me, Dr. Ann Huang. Dr. Ann Huang is the CEO of SonoCharge. Next to Dr. Huang is Dr. Jerry O'Leary, and he is a co-founder and CEO of Siren Opt. Next to Jerry is Dr. Joe Papp. He's a Chief Technology Officer and co-founder of Anthro Energy. And the last but not least is Dr. Patricia McNeil. She is the CEO of the Westwood Aerogel. So I'm going to hand this over to them to talk about their technology and I'll provide some update of the project they are working on. Dr. Wang.
Thank you, Eric. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Anne. I'm the CEO and the founder to SonoCharge Energy. We are a company developing acoustic wave devices to enhance the performance of already existing batteries into the module and the pack for the EV applications. And our company is based in Mountain View, and we now have 25 people working really hard from the technology innovations to the product deployment, integrations, and also customer engineering. So right now we have received 3 grants directly from CEC, which were very respectful. And from the beginning is a CEC Cal Seed, where we were developing the technology from the acoustic device interactions with the lithium metal batteries. And then followed by that, we received the CEC prototype, which is the extension of the Cal Seed concept, and then to move that into a larger scale of the cell. And right now we have another grant under the CEC ramp, which is to deploy the pilot facility to integrate our solution with the existing battery and the module. So we have a process called new unique difficulty processes. And this is really the interactions of the acoustic to the battery and the module. And then we're putting that together directly in our Mountain View site to do the full integration before our product can send to customer for validations and integration in their final product. So yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Huang. And Dr. O'Leary?
My name is Joe O'Leary. I am the co-founder and CEO of Siren Opt. I co-founded Siren Opt about 3 years ago with my former PhD advisor, based on research I'd done during my PhD over at UC Berkeley. Siren Opt makes hardware and software sensing technology to improve the yield, the manufacturing yield and performance of advanced coatings, thin films, and nanoscale materials. Although we work with many different industries, we do have a core focus in improving the manufacturing of anode, cathode, and separator coatings in lithium-ion batteries. Since 2024, we have been deploying progressively better versions of our product to customers in the United States, Europe, Taiwan, and Japan. Today, we have about 30 full-time employees. We've raised a little under $20 million total from venture capital and government grants. Most recently, we were awarded a $2.4 million grant or bridge grant from the California Energy Commission to help accelerate the commercialization of our manufacturing intelligence platform for lithium-ion battery electrodes. That project is scheduled to start next month, and we're very happy to be part of that project. I'm happy to be part of this panel today. Thank you.
Dr. Pep?
Hello, can you all hear me now? Okay, perfect. Happy to see you all today. Thank you, Eric. My name is Joe. I am the CTO and one of the co-founders of Anthro Energy. Anthro Energy is a company that is developing and manufacturing materials for lithium-ion batteries. Our core technology is in the electrolyte material. So Anthro develops a polymer electrolyte that replaces the conventional material. Really quick battery primer, because I recognize not everybody knows the different parts of a lithium-ion cell. A lithium-ion cell is really composed of three main types of materials. You have two electrodes and an electrolyte. The electrolyte is what enables the lithium ions to go back and forth between the electrodes as you charge and discharge the cell. Conventionally, this material is highly flammable, toxic, volatile. We're replacing this material with a polymer electrolyte that improves safety, improves stability, and enables many benefits to the lithium-ion battery. And then critically, we're doing this in a way that does not require any changeover of manufacturing equipment. So the conventional material is injected as a liquid near the end of the battery build process. We formulate our polymer electrolyte so that it's a liquid. Low viscosity, can be injected the exact same way. And then after the battery is built, we can force this phase change so that we can take advantage of the solid state capabilities while still using the exact same manufacturing equipment. We are based in Alameda, California, about 40 people, and we recently received the Power Forward grant to scale our manufacturing. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pep. And Dr. McNeil.
Doing that. Hello, my name is Patricia McNeil, and I am the CEO for Westwood Aerogel. We're originally a spin out of UCLA, and we received funding through the CalSeed Concept Award to pursue basically building envelope materials, but very quickly pivoted during our award to focus more on battery materials. So the material that we work on, aerogel, is basically an extremely light and extremely porous ceramic material. So because of that, you have very excellent fire resistance properties and heat barrier properties. So this is used in the battery cell as basically a line of last defense. So if the cell is overheating, you want to prevent that heat from propagating throughout the system and causing damage within the vehicle and to the occupants. Currently, we are funded through CalSeed with the Prototype Award, and very excited to participate with this panel.
And thank you, Dr. McNeil. Do you have something to demo to?
Yes, please. I just forgot about that. So I have a piece of the material here with me, and I'm going to be doing a blowtorch test for you guys. So my material, a little blowtorch. Here we go. Let's do the thing. I don't need to talk through this. It's kind of self-explanatory. I don't know how long you guys want that for, but we can keep going.
Okay, I'll tell you that how I feel about this. I feel it's great to sit next to so many brilliant minds and the future millionaires. So, I think that, I can see a lot of interesting projects going on. So let's go with the question I have for them, all of them today. Because there are so many innovative technologies. So I would like to know how your company evaluate the risk, safety risks associated with the lithium-ion batteries, and your strategy and your technology you are developing to reduce the risk and also mitigate the hazards. And we will start with Dr. Huang.
Okay,
Thank you. So yeah, I will separate this question to two parts. One is how we operate with the cells that we receive, and then the other is how our technology can help with the safety components during the more extreme operation situation. So in our company, because we're working with many different kinds of the already manufactured cell, and then what we do is integrate our secret sauce, which is a QC device, directly onto that cell or the system. So whenever we receive an incoming cell, we do a very rigorous studies in terms of the operation limits for that type of the cell, charge limits, voltage cutoff, and many other parameters. And then after that, we will be very carefully putting them into an isolated chamber environment where if at the most extreme situation, if the fire event does happen, then it can confine only to that individual cell. And then during the operation, we also do a real-time observation from the electrical or the thermal behavior of the cell to make sure they are running okay. And then in terms of how our technology helping with the safety components, because the fundamental of how this technology works is really to help the ion transportation kinetics in the traditional lithium-ion batteries. And because of this kinetics will impede with how fast you can charge the cell or the side effect after the charging can form, say, from the dendrite plating to the battery cell. And since we emit acoustic wave to the cell, so we are enhancing the ion diffusion kinetics. So based on this behavior of the technology, we are helping with eliminating the dendrites from formation, even at the fast charging conditions. So that's one of the perspective of what we are doing for the daily operation wise, and then how our technology can potentially help with the safety mitigation in some of the more extreme charging conditions.
Thank you, Dr. Wang. Jared?
Yeah, so our product is essentially a measurement instrument. And it is valuable because it can collect a wealth of otherwise unobtainable and very critical manufacturing information about anodes, cathodes, and separator coatings, which Joe mentioned earlier were some of the key components of batteries inside of manufacturing lines and in real time, which does allow those manufacturers to evaluate these key components of the battery before the battery cell is even assembled, right? So our technology then allows manufacturers to detect types of defects or contaminants or other failure modes of these coatings and either remove them from the manufacturing process such that they never see the light of day, or actually correct and mitigate these failure modes in real time, and again, before the battery is manufactured. So to give one very tangible example of something that we can do is oftentimes very small, 30 to 50 micron size metallic contaminants will migrate from battery manufacturing equipment into anode and cathode materials. If those metallic contaminants are not caught before the battery is assembled, the battery will short circuit and in some cases catch on fire. Our technology then allows manufacturers to not only detect these contaminated electrodes as a first step, and then second, remove those electrodes from the manufacturing process so they never see the light of day, and then ideally help the manufacturers identify and mitigate that source of contamination earlier on to then prevent that contamination from continuing to damage further battery electrodes and therefore battery cells.
Thank you. Go ahead, Dr. Pat.
Sure. So at Anthro, we think about battery safety as a function of both frequency and severity. I think it's useful to classify the solutions probably that you hear today into these categories as well. So our technology tackles both of these. I think reducing frequency is maybe slightly more important because you don't want a safety event in the first place. So we have developed a couple properties of our material to help prevent safety events from happening in the first place to begin with. One of these is that our polymer electrolyte acts as a superglue within the cell. So once we inject it, once we induce this polymerization, it adheres with extreme strength between all of the different layers. This is useful because after a battery is built, it's often not just used at the factory. It gets transported somewhere. It gets used somewhere. It gets bumped and potentially used in ways that the manufacturer didn't imagine. This can all result in things sliding around within the cell and misalignment between the electrodes. So by our material acting as the superglue, we actually keep things aligned and prevent electrode misalignment that could lead to lithium plating, cell degradation, thermal runaway, and a safety event. Another way we reduce the frequency of safety events is through our tuned thermal stability. So unlike the conventional electrolyte material that's extremely volatile and tends to outgas at even reasonable temperatures, our material can be sustained at a high temperature for a very long time without any outgassing, without inducing this thermal runaway. And so this is another way that we help prevent safety incidents. Now that, let's say a metal particle slips through the electrode coating process and there's this unavoidable short circuit that does result in cells that employ our electrolyte. At least they're working with a non-flammable electrolyte that will much less likely result in a fire than the conventional solution.
Thank you.
And then the way that we think about battery safety is more from the battery pack design, so the more systematic level. So there's two components that go into that. There's the prevention component and a mitigation component. So from the prevention perspective, you're thinking of things like heat management. So that's when you integrate like your active cooling system for an electric vehicle, for example. Our solution really focuses on the mitigation component. So if a failure event is inevitable, how are you preventing that from becoming a catastrophic failure? The analogy that I like to use is grounded more in the vehicle analogy, where it's like you have these sensors that are trying to beep at you if you're going to get into an accident, but you're always still going to have that airbag in the event that an accident does occur. So the aerogel is like the airbag for the battery pack.
Thank you. We are hearing a lot of different perspective in looking into the risk from the design itself, from the evaluation itself. I think that that's all in line with what CPUC is looking into the how to evaluate the risk to determine how to focus our resources in conducting audit and investigation. So with that, I also want to just throw back to our experience in investigating a lot of incidents that we are seeing, that we found that especially the more energy storage system we are managing nowadays, that we are seeing the more incident from different sources of reason. And that is going to lead to our next question, that there are so many technology that offer the valuable real-time, non-destructive manufacturing insight. So in your experiences, which material defect that have you found to be the most predictive of the real-world safety event? And then if there's any opportunity, how would you think that this the defect that you are thinking that can be able to help to inform the operational parameter for better management, for a better battery management system, and also for the predictive safety protocol improvement? So this time we are going to start with Dr. McNeil first.
So like I said, from our perspective, it's a little bit more holistic. So I'm going to think about this more from the battery system perspective. So we think a lot about like the way that heat interacts with a battery pack. So if you have an incident where you are experiencing overheating, that's where the battery might be at most critical danger. And that overheating can be caused through a variety of events. Basically, the way that you would want to like actively monitor that system is like having the ability to like determine on the cell-to-cell level whether or not there is an failure event being experienced, and maybe like turning off what's causing that failure event more localized on the battery pack perspective.
So I'll dive one level deeper to the cell and material level for lithium-ion batteries. I think the obvious answer, I care a lot about electrolytes. So I view, conventional electrolytes as the weakest link in safety as it relates to conventional lithium-ion batteries. But I think I want to take this chance to talk about a trend that maybe seems obvious, but I really want to emphasize, is that as energy density is being pushed higher and higher for cells, Of course, you have inherent safety risk increase as well. You have the more energy in the same space. But what goes along with that is extreme optimization and tightening of margins within the cell design as well. So you not only have more energy in the same space, but you have electrodes that need to be perfectly aligned. You have less overhang. You have tighter margin of error all around that needs to be considered. So I think that's an important thing that we notice as we continue to work with the kind of next generation cell chemistries.
This question is basically which types of defects are most common or maybe most important for safety, right? And I actually like this question because it highlights kind of how complicated battery manufacturing can be, and also how diverse battery technologies are, right? So for example, we work with one customer where tiny pinholes in their separator coatings will ruin the performance of their battery. We work with another customer that intentionally makes porous separator coatings because it makes that chemistry better, right? We work with one customer where tiny zinc particles in their electrodes will cause their batteries to short. And yet we work with another customer whose batteries are made out of zinc, right? So, I get that because if there's going to be sort of one overarching theme in what leads to problems in battery safety or battery variability, et cetera, it is really that if we pretend this microphone is a battery, right? Is the material at the top of this microphone or this part of the battery the same as the material on the other side of the battery, right? And the scale of sort of the severity of how quote unquote dangerous an individual battery cell, et cetera, is directly proportional to the size of that difference, right? Then the second part of the question basically is, okay, well, how can information about these battery materials or more real-time and ideally non-destructive information be used to improve battery safety, right? Well, I think one thing that is maybe not necessarily obvious to the average person is that an individual battery manufacturing process has thousands and thousands and thousands of knobs to turn and tune, right? But right now, there's actually a pretty limited amount of information that manufacturers can use to turn those knobs, right? And we view at SirenOp, our first sort of core value proposition is like, yes, let's provide manufacturers more information such that they can reasonably tune these knobs. But really, our core goal going forward is, in the future, is not only to provide manufacturers that information, but actually to create software that automatically makes those tuning decisions for them in real time, right? And in fact, the name of our company, SirenOpt, is, a not particularly eloquent play on the term safe optimization, right? Which really refers to automated real-time decision-making to optimize manufacturing processes in the context of safety.
Thank you.
Yeah, echo to what Jared had mentioned regarding to battery degradation is a very complex situation. So, in our company, we are innovating a solution and we can tackle a part of the potential degradation methods that feed into the safety, but we also need other areas of the industry to definitely work together so that the safety can really be addressed. So in particular, in Sonocharge, because our solution is the acoustic wave influencing the ion transportation kinetics. So back to how the mechanism works is really to have eliminating the side effect of the lithium plating from happening. So that's really our core in regards to how our customer, because they wanted to push the limit of the battery. Say right now the battery can only charge at 1C, but can we do 2C, which reduce the charging time from 1 hour to 30 minutes with your technology because of ion kinetics is enhanced. But at the same time, why they don't do that before is because of they can encounter into the lithium plating behavior, which shorten the cycle life or induce the safety factor. So that's the part that we are trying to help is helping helping the customer to achieve the faster charging rate, while at the same time helping to not forming those side effects, so to help with promoting the battery safety perspective.
Well, thank you for sharing all this technology. I think that sounds really exciting. Cannot wait for this technology to be mature for the energy storage system. And that also will come into another question for us to hear your thought on that. You know, the battery innovation continue to evolve as technology development aim to improve the performance and also reduce the cost. Looking forward, how does your company's innovation support the battery safety, not just for today's battery technology, but also the battery technology of the future as well? So that will be the vision that you may have for how to help this battery energy storage system to be safer by using your technology in the future. And we will start with Dr. Pep.
Okay, wonderful. So I think obvious answer is that we're spending R&D dollars to make sure that our materials remain relevant to the chemistries that we see emerging that might be relevant next year in 2030 and beyond. But I think the really important part of your question is focusing on that reduced cost phrase. So what we're driving to do at Anthro is also continually push down the cost of our materials and of the production of lithium-ion batteries. So to do that, we are making sure that our supply chain is ever more robust and optimized, and also that our production processes are continually undergoing optimization so that we can drive down costs. I think this is, you know, one of the most important factors in successful battery companies.
Thank you. What do you think about this, Dr. O'Leary?
Points Joe made. They're sort of separate from what, you know, we do at SciUp, right? I mean, but basically, you know, perspective is essentially that, you know, battery safety or lack thereof is very strongly a function of how variable battery manufacturing processes are. And battery manufacturing processes, like all manufacturing processes, are variable, right? And, you know, then the question becomes, okay, well, how do we manage that variability? How do we reduce that variability? How do we mitigate that variability, et cetera, right? And we'll subscribe to an old manufacturing philosophy, which is, you know, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, right? And our core thesis is effectively that, as we sort of mentioned earlier, that if we can, you know, provide manufacturers sufficient information. Now, defining sufficient is a different question, but if we can provide them sufficient information, they should be able to tighten their manufacturing specs enough such that they can confidently and reliably, you know, and scalably ship safe batteries. Right.
Sounds good. Thank you. Dr. Huang?
Yeah, so this is definitely not an easy question from the engagement with the customer, especially for the EV domains. They all view your technologies, the cost to value is very hard to capture for the safety components. So they always feel when you provide a solution, safety is already embedded in your hardware cost, and then your value proposition, say fast charging or long cycle life, which can be captured in the economy calculation, but the safety part is fairly tough. And we are also trying to understand how to communicate these components to the customer, because not only the performance metric is important, but the safety is also important to consider into the overall value creation, and then therefore also embedded into the cost calculation.
Thank you. Dr. McNeil?
So I think some of the balance here is being able to develop useful quality control metrics while still being able to reach an economy of scale. Because if you're not reaching an economy of scale, it's never going to be cost effective enough to be widely implemented. But at the same time, it's like you can't lose track of like what are the key easy to measure components that you can do as basically like in situ throughout the manufacturing process. So you want to be able to collect sufficient data, like Jared's saying, but you want to do it in a simple and cost-effective way so that this can be implemented quickly without having to try and take lab scale procedures and roll with that.
Thank you. So, by hearing all this, I think that, we all know that for the future, especially that we think that in the future energy map, that energy storage system play a very key role. And also looking forward to, as we're talking about by 2045, that we may have the significant growth of energy storage system in California, likely based on a projection that will be about a 500 energy storage site that we are looking into. So with that, I would like to just get your thought about that. Do you think that is the most critical breakthrough that you may imagine for us that is so essential to achieve the goal that we are looking forward to for California in the future? Is that about a technology? Is that about regulation, or is that about economics? And with your thought about this, that we are hoping that we can eliminate those large scale of the disaster that we have experienced in the past. So what do you think was the most critical breakthrough that you would like to see, and with a possible assistance from our grant and also from this symposium, participant from this symposium? And this time we'll start with Jared.
So this question I think is important that we have the proper context, right? Which is that no battery manufacturer in the United States can even remotely sniff the capability of manufacturing batteries like that scalably and that safely. We are not even close. So then the question becomes, well, how do we fill that gap, right? Well, one easy way, especially since all of us are recent grant winners, is to say, okay, well, that technology development should be subsidized, right? But then if we look historically at recent battery companies, right, I don't think we necessarily understand that level of required subsidization. So for example, there's a famous battery company called Northvolt. I don't know if you guys are aware, but there is $15 billion to, after 10 years, produce batteries at what we have heard to be yields under 10%. So then what is the second option, right? The second option may be for the United States and California, et cetera, to become more open and to partner with more advanced battery manufacturing companies outside of the US, and particularly, in China. Now, what does that, collaboration look like? What does that partnership look like? I don't know. But those are the only two, big breakthroughs I can see allowing us to achieve safe battery manufacturing at that scale in the near future.
Well, let's continue with Dr. Pat.
Sure. I think there's a lot of change that needs to happen in order to prioritize safety. So I think my answer would be a collective mindset shift to prioritize safety by design. And what I feel is necessary for this is a simplification for people buying batteries to choose the safer option. I think people are willing to spend more on safer batteries, but probably from what you've all heard today, safety in batteries is complicated. Batteries are complicated. It's hard to identify a safer option, or even what the potential safety issues are. So I think I would look for support from the people in this room to make that choice simpler. So bear with me with a very imperfect example, but I don't know that much about agriculture or produce, but I appreciate that when I walk into a grocery store, I can go to the produce aisle and have the choice of organic or conventional. I don't mind paying 10 extra cents for an organic banana. That choice is very easy to make, and I kind of trust that organic label. I think there needs to be a simplification of battery safety, or what it means, almost to that level, so that people can very easily identify the safe option, the unsafe or conventional option, and make a judgment call based on that.
Thank you. Dr. Menil?
I find this to be a hard question. In my mind, I always like having like parallel line approaches where maybe there's a short-term solution that involves a little bit more collaboration and just taking things that currently exist and seeing how far we can push those boundaries. But at the same time, you always want to be able to invest in what the next innovation is. So you want to also push the boundary from the perspective of the battery manufacturing itself, which is included in a lot of the startups represented here. And whether or not, I'm trying not to disagree with Jared's point because of the batteries out there that currently do meet specs, but from just like a local economic perspective, you want to be able to build a robust supply chain that's grounded much more locally. And that's something that I think that we, especially like in California, need to start to prioritize more, which is also why we should be investing more in battery technologies and creating that local supply chain, which can match the demand that we're going to be seeing for our energy ecosystem.
Thank you for the comment. Dr. Huang?
This is definitely a not easy question. In order to really have the ecosystem from the innovation to deployment to adoption, I think those three parameters that you mentioned are fairly equally important: technology, economy, and also regulation. But I think I wanted to address from the technology perspective, because that's really where the foundation or the starting point before it goes to the regulations and considering the economy of how the market adoption look like. So for the safety, and also combined with what our company do is not as other companies who is in the manufacturer domain, we are more in the deployment the situation of the devices. So it's an in-use situation. So what we see in the landscape is there's more potential sensors, safety detections at the cell level during the deployment stage to really understand how the battery safety look like. Are we going to shut down one of the particular module inside the big pack to prevent the thermal runaway? Or on the other hand, what are the other, for example, the thermal insulation so that we can isolate the fire or the safety only into that cell or in the smallest module that's possible. So we are seeing those movements in the industry.
Thank you. I think that, thank you. For all of the perspective we are hearing, I really think that maybe I set a trap for you to choose between technology, regulation, and economy. And I totally agree with Dr. Huang's conclusion on that. All these perspectives need to be, they are intertwined and they need to be considered all together equivalently. Not necessarily equivalent, but they are all the very important factor. Technology certainly that to improve the battery safety that from our investigation, and I will just touch on our experience of looking at the battery technology. Some findings that we found for the early generation of batteries. Now they are gradually being incorporated. The mitigation are gradually incorporated into the later generation of battery design. So I think that it's not only about technology, but also the lessons learned from what we see, what we learn from the instance. And I think that's very important to provide a feedback to the technology sector. Like all of them, they are developing the very critical and advanced forward-looking technology for the better energy storage system. And of course, for me, my background is not necessarily aligned with all of their research, but I can hear that these are very important information that we are learning, and we know that we remain very hopeful for the future energy storage system, and that it's continue to play a very important role for the future California energy mapping. So with that, I want to just I'm checking out time. I think that we may have a couple minutes to open for any questions that you may have from this outstanding young generation scientists and grant recipients. So let me see that we have any question from the audience about the energy storage system. Yes, in the back.
I don't need to. Okay. Thank you so much for the panel. I really appreciated the insights. I'm curious about how I agree with the idea that battery design, battery sort of process and standardization and manufacturing is going to be a critical piece of making sure that batteries are safe. And I also am curious how you all are thinking about workforce development and the role of occupational health and safety training on the manufacturing line, how we align those standards, how we think about, how to react to things like thermal runway, chemical safety handling, machine interface. And I raise that question because when we see a lot of these joint ventures across the country, they are actually having accidents once they reach that scale. And I agree, Jared, with your point, we're thinking about scaling and growing those joint ventures here across the US, but with that scale comes extra training and extra emphasis on making sure that the workers are safe on the line. So just curious your thoughts.
Yeah, it's like battery factories and other advanced materials factories today that do not have humans, right? And that should be our goal, right? But the question is, how do we get there? Right? In the beginning, you need people there, right? And the only way around that is to heavily regulate and heavily supervise, right? So, like for example, for our equipment, we need to pass a lot of pretty intense like safety and like legal certifications to even legally place our equipment on certain manufacturing floors, right? Those types of certifications and regulations could become more common and more thorough, right? Outside of putting in that type of extra process, I don't see how this is avoidable. Yeah, I don't see any other solution.
Can I answer quickly? I think, yes, Inter will also be using more automation, but we care a lot about our workforce. And I think the saying that we bring up all the time is slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And I think it goes back to my answer about safety as a mindset and prioritizing safety as a mindset. And I think that we as a nation in this blossoming industry have a lot to learn about safety in the battery industry. And so I think it's about keeping an open mind, not assuming that we know the best practices now and being willing to continue to evolve as we grow, learning from our partners and others. But I don't have a perfect answer besides we're trying to be very intentional about safety.
Anything else to add from our panelists?
I just echo that. So my manufacturing process isn't specifically in battery design, but there's still that level of intentionality and trying to incorporate automation to the extent you can so that there's as minimal human interface with dangerous components of the manufacturing process. And I think that's something everyone here is very mindful of.
Thank you. So I think that with the time that I would, first of all, I want to thank you for joining us today to discuss the future energy storage safety. And at the same time, I also want to thank our great panelists. They all provide a very great insight and also so many new technology for us to enjoy. So if you will join me to give that a big round of applause. Thank you.
All right. What a great way to kick off and come back from lunch. That was such an insightful panel. I think that's the first time I've ever seen fire on the stage at an Epic Symposium. But, I'm all for more interesting demonstrations like that. That is why we come to these events. So to kick us off in our next couple hours, we have a series of parallel breakout sessions happening from 1:40 to 2:40 and then 2:50 to 3:50 before reconvening back on the stage. So I'll just quickly go over that. For the afternoon, for the upcoming breakout session in this room, that will be focused on next generation charging technologies. For those interested in improving the performance of large buildings, that will be in the second floor conference room. If you head up the stairs and make a left of the speaker check-in booth, there will be a conference room up there, and we'll have our panelists ready for that. There will be a 10-minute transition to get up there. After those sessions, we'll have one more set of parallel breakouts. In this room from 250 to 350 will be a plenary session or a breakout session on the integration of climate data products in electricity sector planning and policy. Otherwise, in that conference room upstairs on the second floor will be a panel focused on a breakout session on affordability enabled by utility grid modernization. That's a showcase of various utility EPIC projects and how they are improving the grid. So feel free as we head to this transition, if you're interested in next gen charging, feel free to stay in this room or head to the auditorium to grab a quick break. We're hoping to start that. We'll see you right around 1:45 or so. Otherwise, begin to head up towards the second floor conference room where you'll find the panel on improving performance in large buildings. Thanks, everyone. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So we're about to start again this panel on next generation vehicle charging technologies. I think it's a great segue coming in from the battery safety panel where there were discussions about ever more increasing demands to make batteries denser, more dynamic, have more capabilities. And certainly some of that is leading into being put in electric vehicles to help with their charging. So with that, I'd like to invite up to the stage Commissioner John Reynolds, as well as the other panelists for this session.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all as excited about this panel as I am. I'm looking forward to hearing from three EPIC awardees about the work that they're doing in transportation electrification. Because we all know the transportation sector here in California is the largest source of emissions, and therefore there's an incredible opportunity for electric vehicles to help us reduce emissions. And as we know in the energy space, there are both tremendous opportunities and tremendous challenges with respect to electric vehicle charging and the grid. And I'm looking forward to the conversation that we have on this panel about how these different projects interact with some future opportunities. So without further ado, I think we have a few slides, and I'm going to ask each of our panelists respectively to introduce themselves and their projects as we get the slides up.
Testing. It's flashing green and red. All right. Nice. This one works well. All right. So I'm Keith Graber. I'm the engineering director at the California Lighting Technology Center at UC Davis. And I'm going to highlight our project that we have funded through EPIC. So our project was funded under GFO 21303, which is vehicle to building technologies for resilient power backup. And long story short, we ended up submitting a project concept that partnered with Caltrans, and we're leveraging a heavy duty electric sweeper for the Oakland Bridge to back up part of the Caltrans facility there at the base of the bridge. So if you're headed west, you look over right when you go under the ramp, past the point of no return, there's a large maintenance yard there, and then there's also a training center. So this project's going to associate the electric sweeper combined with the vehicle to building equipment and attach it to the training center and serve as a backup there. And that will potentially turn into an EOC for Caltrans and the CHP in the future. So I'm going to talk about each of the project team members here briefly. So at UC Davis, we have two entities contributing to this project. We have CLTC, where I work, and we're responsible for the overall project management. And we're also focused on validating the vehicle and the equipment interoperability pre-installation. And then we're also responsible for testing the equipment on site, creating an islanding events, metering, and then reporting on the performance. The other group at UC Davis that's working on this project is the Green Technology Laboratory. So that's led by Dr. Jaewon Park. And Jaewon's a battery guru and has been working on all things battery chemistry and also has quite a reputation in second life battery technology. So the solicitation specifically asked for work to be done on understanding the effects of charging and discharging on the life of the EV. So that resulted in Green Tech Lab being brought onto the project to test battery cells at different C rates and different operating temperatures. The technology provider is Nuvi Inc. So Nuvi is the hardware provider, the software provider, and Nuvi's also managing the site improvements required for the project. So they're working with an EPC right now, finalizing the site design. And then the West Oakland Environmental Indicators Project is our community-based organization. They're have deep roots in that area, and they're focused on environmental justice, and we're heavily reliant on them for gathering insights from the local community on perceived barriers to adoption for EVs, along with vehicle to building and V2H applications. So we're really excited about this project. We think that the outcomes of this project are going to contribute to the broader knowledge base around vehicle to building and how that might make EV adoption more cost effective. Turn this off. Oh, we can go back to that slide. Yeah, it's just a little highlight there from the battery cycle testing. There's a lot of results from the battery cycle testing, but right here you can just see a snapshot for 50 duty cycles across a range of operating temperatures. And there's also a glamour shot of the EV sweeper there. So if you ever see one of those going across the bridge, you can try to decide if you think that one's natural gas or electric. They both look pretty similar. But
awesome. That was very glamorous. Thanks for showing me that. Now I know what a sweeper glamour shot looks like. My name is Apoorv Bhargava. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called WeaveGrid. I don't know if we have our slide ready. Yes, we do. Okay, very exciting. Affordability has been the number one topic I think that most people have talked about. And I know we have two split tracks between next generation vehicle charging and affordability, but the reality is those two things are deeply interconnected. Our project, which is one of the two EPIC projects we're currently working on, is in partnership with Southern California Edison. We're really grateful for the support here for Revved Up, because a critical challenge of vehicle electrification, and the one that we're facing really deeply in California, is the fact that as rates are going up, a predominant portion of the cost to serve is on the distribution system. And distribution systems are not like bulk system. They are not like generation. They are not like transmission. You cannot do the same things to help operate essentially the factory that keeps the grid afloat. You know, distribution systems feel much more like an operating line than a power plant dispatch model. And so what Revved is really focused on is enrolling several thousand vehicles in partnership with our community partners in Southern California, together with Southern California Edison, and really leveraging those vehicles in an aggregated fashion to build what some people call a virtual power plant, others may call managed charging, whatever you want to call it. We are leveraging it to drive and avoid distribution system upgrades that at scale add up to on the order of tens of billions of dollars for Californians over the next 10 to 15 years. And it is a clearly known fact that the load factor on the distribution system is on the order of about 30 to 40%. And already our results via Revved Up is showing that we're able to have asset level load reduction of anywhere between 30 to 65% per asset. We're talking about feeders seeing tremendous amount of load factor improvement and asset peaking going down. Now, asset peaking is not the same as bulk peaking, because guess what? When you plug in 1, 2, 3 EVs onto your same residential transformer, that might be at 10 or 11 p.m. that you create a 25 kVA or 25 kilowatt surge. That's not when your bulk system is peaking. And so there is a challenge increasingly growing on the grid of heterogeneous peaking between the distribution local system, driving up these costs, which are already extremely high due to wildfire recovery and so forth, and at the same time, so seeing what is an increasingly volatile is the wrong word, but an increasingly flexible generation and transmission system, where of course we've got really creative solutions like ELRP, dynamic rates, and so forth, providing those solutions. But you do need something different when it comes to the distribution system. And that's what WoveGrid is really highlighting and showcasing with our partnership with SCE and the Gateway Cities. And I won't talk a ton about it right now, but also our partnership via Epic 4 with Pacific Gas and Electric that Mike Delaney was talking about earlier today, where we're deferring thousands of transformers across PG&E's territory, ensuring that, I think he said, spend 100 million and save a few billion. Well, we're not spending 100 million, to be clear, otherwise I wouldn't be here. But jokes aside, like, it is a mechanism by which we can really help drive a lot more savings and, most critically, affordability and downward pressure on rates for all ratepayers. Another really exciting thing about our project that I just want to highlight is that bidirectional energy and bidirectional charging is something that is on the cusp. Now, it has been on the cusp for a few years. I think in the medium and heavy duty space, we've definitely seen it break through a bit more. But in light duty, it has been challenged due to interoperability challenges, due to hardware issues, due to, frankly, the OEMs not being ready to deploy it at scale. And so through our work, through this Epic project, we are going to be demonstrating and showing some of that value at a small scale. Now, I want to be very honest, it's 20 bidirectional charging sites and some amount of workforce development to enable that installation and learning versus the thousands of EVs that we are already managing on our platform down in Southern California and the tens of thousands up here in Northern California. So definitely different orders of magnitude, but still we're talking about tens of megawatts, ideally finding a pathway to scaling that to hundreds of megawatts of flexible load that we can actually manage the EVs that are just sitting in people's garages today, right? There's already over 3 gigawatts worth of EVs in Southern California and SCE's territory. No one's doing much with them. And this is really meant to, I think, prove out through R&D the value of distribution orchestration, and then leverage that to build a business case to really scale this kind of flexibility solution.
Great. Good to see you all. My name is Watson Collins, a senior technical executive with EPRI. I joined EPRI in 2017. And prior to that, I had 34 years with the Northeast Utilities. There's a utility out of the Northeast part of the US. So don't hold that against me. But what I was able to learn as being on the utility side of things, I actually learned a lot of the opportunities and challenges, and it actually helps me a lot with EPRI as we're looking towards charging infrastructure and the challenges we're facing. We can go to the next slide there, thanks. And you know, part of the question, was what got us started on this pathway and how we started down here. So actually around 2017, I was working on electric vehicles since 2008 or 9, something like that. And around 2017, I started noticing that like the infrastructure for these bigger projects was actually a bit of a challenge. And that's kind of where I started to focus in a lot of the work that I was working on and things in that area and activities around that. And so when this RETA opportunity came out, we jumped on it because we were already thinking about this. We were starting to figure out, okay, how do we address this? And what was really kind of special about the RETA opportunity, and our project is called eTruck, but what was really special about the opportunity is you see that I have 5 tracks of areas where we're doing work. And what kind of really is kind of great about that is a lot of projects, sometimes you have a silo approach to a project. You're just doing one thing, and we're getting learnings in these 5 different areas. And since it's all been through this eTruck project, we're able to share those learnings in these other areas. So it really has been helpful. When we were working with BP and Travel Centers of America on our demonstration sites, it helps us with the statewide corridor plan. And as we work with stakeholders in the community engagement part and the workforce development, it helps us be sensitive also to that statewide plan. So that's the great part of it. We have a great set of partners. CalSTART is one of our major partners in this, but a number of other organizations that are part of this. I think we have 11 other partners in the project. So we're getting a lot of diverse opinions just from our partnership. But also a big part of the project is been our stakeholder consortium. So we have in that first bucket on the top left there, we have committees. We have a workforce development committee, a community engagement, a technical advisory committee. So these committees, we spent the time talking to them about what's going on in heavy duty truck electrification, and then we started really understanding the issues and concerns of the community from that group. We did the second bullet is around, we did a fleet needs and technology maturity assessment. We interviewed a whole bunch of vehicle manufacturers, fleets, EV charging infrastructure providers. We did a whole bunch of interviews. We listened. We tried to understand what's going on in the industry. Where are we technology-wise? Ready to advance this. When the solicitation was put out there, the expectation was, has anybody heard of the MCS connector for the trucks? We got a few hands. Anybody else heard of? A few people. So this MCS connector is the connector for higher power charging, something on the order of a megawatt for EV, for the bigger trucks. And at the time the solicitation was put together and we put our proposal, there was an expectation that was closer to market. So as we did these interviews, we learned, oh, okay, this isn't quite as close to market. We had to, understand what are the challenges, and so we have a number of reports on our website that you can see around that. We also have a high power charging lab that we opened at Pomona at the SCE facility. So we're able to now bring in any kind of vehicle and test the charging equipment there. So that Pomona facility, we just opened it up in, I think it was May this year, I believe. And so that's open. And we encourage people that if you have charging infrastructure or vehicles that you want to test to use that facility. And then Tony from BP just corrected me. I have an artist rendering of one of our demonstration sites. So we have two pilot sites that we're going to deploy. And he was just telling me that there's actually a construction webcam that I should have linked to with this presentation. But there, construction's going on at the site there in Pomona. And then we also have modeling done by LBNL and Cambridge Systematics and a number of others that helped us, and we have these statewide corridor heat maps that we have available on our website that kind of show where the density is and the likeliness of charging and the opportunities for charging for those trucks. So, all this stuff, a lot of this stuff is available on our eTruck website. It's linked on the bottom there. Again, we feel lucky that the CEC is funding this because it brought together that portfolio of projects, gave us an opportunity to integrate a lot of this information together in a comprehensive way. So really appreciate that. I do have 2 more slides if you can give me a second. And I'm not going to talk about these now. These will be more for the question and answer session. But one of these, I just kind of want to plant a seed of typically when customers come to the utility, they initiate a service request. And people were asking about this service connection process and the timelines. These bigger sites, we need to figure out ways to get that the dialogue going between the utilities and the customers earlier. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in the future. And then the next slide one of the things we've been, the technology, one of the technologies we've been pursuing at the lab is around solid state transformers. And the other message I want to leave here, and I won't explain what's on the slide, you guys will have these available afterwards. The other thing I want to explain is that that's kind of like a foundational building block on future grid architectures that can be available to utilities to address the challenges of, hey, I got to build infrastructure to these sites. And so again, while the solid state transformer thing sounds like a technologist dream, like they get to play around with this, it's actually going to lead to solving some of the grid challenges, and I'll talk about that in my comments. So thank you.
Thank you all for introducing your projects. I'd like to stick with Watson for a moment. You talked a bit about community engagement in the course of your project at the outset of your presentation, and I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about what worked well in engaging with communities and other stakeholders, and perhaps if there are some lessons about what could make that engagement more valuable.
So I actually would say it's actually kind of, you have to put serious effort into community engagement, because you have to ask many times. Like, just because you get no the first time, you have to keep asking. And so because people are busy, people have a lot of other things going on. So that's probably my biggest message, like in the community engagement stuff, is don't stop just because you got no the first time. Now, how's that manifested itself? When we were working with the community development committee there, what we learned really was they really didn't understand that medium heavy duty charging and what happens with that infrastructure. And so we kind of had to spend some time explaining what the technology is, and actually, that there is a trend towards this, and that this is kind of real now. So we had to explain that. We had to listen to the technology providers. Again, they don't want to say we're not doing this yet, or you have to kind of keep pushing and finally finding ways to ask the question. And even with our ITAC and TAC, again, we really try and get the engagement of our TACing members. And sometimes they're quiet, and sometimes we have to kind of, in webinars, we have to say, I'll call Tony on it like I'm doing right now, and I'll say, hey, Tony, do you mind talking? So I kind of have to find friends in the audience at times to make sure that folks are going to respond. So I guess it's not just, you can't just say, I tried and it didn't work. You have to really put the effort in.
I think definitely an important lesson for us all, that the effort's got to be there, and you'll get more value when you put it in. Turning to Apurv, thinking about developing and scaling charging solutions, I think introduces a host of potential interoperability challenges at the vehicle level, the charger level, the site level. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about interoperability issues as you've confronted them, and maybe some opportunities and some lessons that you've learned.
Yeah, interoperability in EVs right now is the Wild West. It goes everywhere from literally reverse engineered, hacked APIs that people are using to try and control your cars, through to cyber secure, over engineered, deeply integrated into an idealized state that doesn't exist kind of thing. And the truth is somewhere in the middle always, right? I come back to why do you want interoperability? You want it because you fundamentally want different devices talking to different customers, ultimately driving the same or equitable or equivalent value. And that value comes from particularly end devices in two formats. One is data. The second is controls. And so the interoperability questions that most of us sometimes forced into almost like a standards conversation, but then, it's that classic joke, like every time you have a standard, the 13th standard is pretending to be the standard of the 12 other standards that existed. We're stuck in that trap right now on interoperability, and like a lot of EV manufacturers are not interested until they are told what the value of, for example, V1G or V2G or any of that is in coalescing around some sort of data or control standard. So what we've found is that we're very happy to play that bridge because, and I think we'll talk about some of the other IT and OT systems that utilities are implementing, but ultimately we want to still drive maximum customer value and also ease of use. And so, for example, a partner of ours like Rivian, we're working very closely with them to ensure that whatever a DERMS says to us from a utility is effectively translated very cleanly into a charging schedule that a customer can update on their app or in their head unit, and that doesn't actually harm the use case of the vehicle, but drives that V1G or V2G value. And if we aren't clear about what the value is, then you're going to end up talking about different data standards. Some people are going to be shipping data every 5 seconds, some people every 15 minutes, some people will send it in SFTP files, some people via APIs, and the same problem applies for controls. And I think controls is where things get really hairy. And there is a different, and for those of you who want to nerd out about data versus controls, please find me later. But like, there's a huge difference because the ability to tell a vehicle or a charger what to do, especially when we're talking about export down the road, I mean, it's something that we need to be really fine-grained on. And right now we're finding that every OEM is building their own vehicle stack completely independently without, again, that common framework of value. And so that is why Epic is so important, because in our case, we don't believe the technology needs a lot of kicking the tires. What we believe is that we need to establish common value frameworks that we can then bring back to the industry and say, this is how we're going to scale these projects. And as we scale these projects, this is how you need to build your systems today for 5 years from now, so that the data, the controls, eventually the bidirectionality, all of that is talking in the same way, such that it leads to ultimate interoperability.
Definitely a tremendous opportunity to drive more value and big challenge in getting there.
Yeah.
Keith, I wonder if you could talk to us a little bit about what you see as the biggest opportunity in driving beneficial electrification, and maybe some of the benefits or opportunities around the electrification of vehicles along with the electrification of other sectors like buildings.
Yeah, it seems like those two should go together easily, right? Maybe. Yeah, I think, yeah, you find that folks are driving in those directions or headed towards in those two directions, maybe for the same motivations, but maybe you have two different motivations. I think the ultimate solution to that is rethinking utility programs and figuring out how to make that easy, right? Going and deciding to purchase a vehicle, whether it's for your own personal use or for your business is one type of a decision. And then deciding to embark on a really long, inconvenient renovation, again, whether it's at your home or at your place of business, those are two really different types of decisions, and they have really different financial constraints as well. So yeah, I think that we need a big overhaul of programs and what the utilities are able to claim value for and pass on to their customers in those program structures. And I think it's going to take a lot of work in the form of many small pilots to understand where the sweet spot is for these types of ideas. So I'm not an accountant. I'm normally just spending the money and not tracking it, but I do think that we have to figure out how to leverage some of the funding. The most exciting kind of pie in the sky, uneducated guess would be how can we leverage automotive financing to transfer into low interest loans for building upgrades? Is there an opportunity there? I'm not sure, but it seems like there's a lot of money in the vehicle OEM space, and maybe we could lean into that a little bit. Open to other ideas and comments.
or interoperability?
Apoorv, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, the landscape I think we're confronting around the nation. We're seeing it here in California. There's some real utility challenges around investing in the grid in order to support electrification demand and all of the changes in customer end uses of energy. How do you see EV charging infrastructure and the orchestration of EVs playing into that space? How do you see that connection playing out?
And that's in light with all the other grid modernization work that's also happening, right? Yeah, I mean, I try to simplify things down to metaphors. I think utilities are in a multi-decade transition towards trying to implement ADMS and DERMS. And at the same time, there's an increasing conversation around upgrading smart meters towards AMI 2.0 and so forth. And I sort of see those as like the slices of a sandwich. I don't like my sandwich dry. And I don't think that that's the approach we should take. These are pretty dry systems that are driving improvements on the IT and sometimes OT stack, but they do not talk to customers. And if we are moving to a world where customer centricity in this evolving energy landscape is critical, we need solutions that are talking and thinking deeply about customers and are keeping their constraints in mind, not just at an engineering level, but at a human level. A car is basically not a DER. I mean, this is like my controversial view, which is like a car is a car, not a DER. It happens to have energy cost and it could have energy value. But if it is not orchestrated well, I don't care how much smart meter data you have, and I don't care how much top-down sort of orchestration, like constraint setting you do. If a customer is not able to have their car fully charged by the end of the night, they're not going to enroll for any program. They're not going to allow you to do anything, and you're just going to have to overbuild the grid to accommodate for that. And I think this is where the role of players like WaveGrid and others who are able to talk in a interoperable way to a 2030.5 DERMS, for example, and also leverage all the data coming off of, let's say, 1.0 or 2.0 meters, bringing it together with the edge level telemetry and controls that vehicles and chargers can provide, or batteries or thermostats, that actually leads to orchestration. Because again, using another metaphor, you're not going to just listen to drums. You're not just going to listen to it. You need to violins. You kind of need everything to play together. And I think this is where we're headed in this world, because we've also seen these experiments play out over the last 5 to 6 years as certain infrastructure, digital infrastructure in particular, has been deployed, has been delayed, has been deployed, has been delayed. The customer's needs are showing up today. So I don't really care what Gantt we're operating on IT and OT projects. Customers are saying today, help me save money on my charging, help me save money on my bill. And I think solutions like ours play really nicely with other existing utility solutions in making that affordability come to light in a way where we need to put downward pressure on rates. And I think solutions like this enable that.
So WaveGrid can add some sauce to the utility sandwich. Watson, taking a step back for the medium duty and heavy duty sector, how do you envision utilities and industry evolving over the next several years with respect to this space?
Yeah, and I'm going to stick with the sandwich analogy. It won't be a dry sandwich analogy, but I'm going to use a pizza analogy, pizza shop. So we all know you can order pizza, through your app, and 25 minutes later you can go to the shop and pick it up, and the world is great. When you go to the shop and say, "Hey, I want to order 75 pizzas," the shop goes, Hey, like, I wish you called me a week ago. I wish you told me sooner, because I would have ordered more dough, or I would have added people to the shift, or there's stuff I would have done. And EV charging infrastructure is like that. Like, the one pizza is like the home charger at your house. It's people know how to do that. And the 75 pizza is when you're building a 5 megawatt site and you want to have a bunch of chargers at 5 megawatts. And it just takes the utilities more time than because just the physics of the grid, like there's actually it's just the physics of the grid of like what you can push through a certain wire. It's actually that simple. And so while utilities are, have this issue of lengthy timelines for these bigger projects is if you have a 5 megawatt project, and again, this is why I started looking at this stuff. If you have a 5 megawatt project, we've done surveys across the country and said, about 20% of the locations across the country, the utility can't serve 5 megawatts without doing upgrades. So that means if you have a 5 megawatt project, like you're going to be lucky enough that you picked the location that the utility can serve it, or there's a quick fix to it. But what that one slide I showed is like, you got to connect. We got to get this information to the utility. The stuff has to be in the utility planning process earlier so that it can be addressed. And so you can kind of pre-position the grid for this future load. So that's the other one of the other important things. Now, there's also discussion about flexible interconnections, and that's another very important way to address this. Like, how do you deal with these bigger charging projects, and the physics limits on the distribution grid? Like, how do you fit these things in? And so that's really what all these kind of things are doing of like this early notification and flexible interconnections is trying to navigate through that. So that's really super important. That's like, we've got activities going on there. We actually have one project where we're developing some software and a platform for customers and utilities to talk together. So that's super important. And then I also just want to wrap up with one thing. I talked about that other technology approach and solid state transformers. So the fundamental problem utilities have is when they have to build a line to a customer. For these bigger projects, we're starting to look at EV projects that are in between size of a transmission solution and a distribution solution. So they're kind of in that gray area for big projects. And so how do you solve that? Well, people don't want transmission lines running down the street, big poles and all that other stuff. And so what we can do, we can get a lot more power using solid state transformers and DC power distribution. We can get twice the power down the same right away as the existing AC line. So that's another like step change we can make. Now, I understand that's the optimal technology, topology of the future, and we kind of make the baby steps towards that, but that's the longer term future.
Very exciting. And one last question from me before we open to the audience, and this is for all of our panelists. Could you talk a little bit about what you're excited for the next year for your project or your organization, starting with Keith?
Yeah, for our project specifically that I talked about earlier, we have some really important site testing coming up where we're going to be observing islanding events and collecting data on the performance of the actual system as designed. So that's really exciting to finally get to the end of that road. It's been a little bit of a haul. If anyone who knows how the GFO numbers work, that project is not the newest. So that's going to be great to see. And then for our organization, beyond that project, we have a few other pilots starting up that are going to be leveraging dynamic pricing in the residential sector. And we're going to be working to quantify the effect of the pricing signal on load flexibility in that sector. And that's going to include a lot of residential charging technologies. So we're very excited to get into that space as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're really excited to use the data we have gotten out of both of our EPIC projects, the one that we just talked about and also the PG&E one, to actually, I think, help inform some of the rate making and proceedings that are ongoing around updating the ACC or actually starting to have more robust conversations about the value of flexibility on the distribution grid. Because to be honest, y'all, like we've been having these conversations for 10 years and we're still having the conversation of like, what is the value of flexibility on the distribution system? It's kind of absurd at this point. So we've got to start updating those manuals. We've got to start updating it so the solutions can scale. Because I'm very worried that especially in this moment of withering federal support, if we don't find scaling pathways, like you're just going to see a bunch of turnover of companies and solutions because people are just not going to be able to make it. And so if we can now prove out the business case, it's going to be high time we start really growing these programs or turning them into programs.
Yeah, no, I love the scalability comment there. I think the thing we're most excited for is I'm looking forward to going to the ribbon cutting of our pilot sites over the next year. That'll be some great days there and starting to see trucks using this infrastructure. It's really exciting that I know it's a tough time in the industry, but it is exciting to see these activities continue to move forward and the commitments by a lot of partners to keep these things moving forward. So really appreciate that.
With that, I think we can open to the audience. Are there any audience questions that our panelists can answer?
Good afternoon, Kurt Johnson from the Climate Center. Apoorv, appreciate your remarks about interoperability. Given California's historical leadership in creating clean energy standards, would it be appropriate for California to sort of pass a law calling upon the CEC to develop the kind of interoperability standards you talked about? And then second question, is that politically achievable in California? You had a bunch of bills that were vetoed last week that were about realizing the billions of dollars in savings that you've talked about, and those are all vetoed. So should we try to pass a law that moves in that direction? And then what are its political prospects? Thank you.
I can't speak to the political part. That's, out of my pay grade. I'll let the commissioner answer that one. But I don't think we should create a law. To be honest, I think we're back to that XKCD cartoon again. It'll be the 14th standard. We have standards. People are building towards those standards. ISO 15118-20 exists. We're starting to do that. If we create a new standard, or other EBSE companies are going to go bankrupt because they're going to have to go update everything. There are already enough stranded assets out there. Automakers are already not sure how much they should be investing in EVs right now. Every new standard setting exercise is just, it's just wasted time and space. What we want to be crisp about is are there programs today which can scale, which automakers can then build those standards towards. We don't have a single V2G program in the country. Not a single one. We don't have a single, managed charging program in the state of California. What is the state with the most EVs supposed to be telling the industry to move towards? That's the biggest thing we can do. I think another standard setting committee will just grind everyone's gears and we won't get anything done.
Microphone coming to you.
Hi, Tony Zamora with BP. A question for you, Apoorv. Again, on interoperability. So I don't understand the technology. A lot of the jargon you're saying I don't understand. But I know that California and Silicon Valley is a technology hub, right, in the world. And as you put it, a federal withering of support is coinciding just as we need this technological advancement. I agree, standards don't. Two-part question. One is maybe you could explain a bit what I think your term common value framework as opposed to, but also I'm thinking as our technology and our industry is in a critical point. It continues to develop in Europe and in China. And so what ways are you able to connect or cross-pollinate, or what are they doing? And how do you know what they're doing? Are there ways, are there structures that you're able to kind of, as we're weathering support here, sustain that? That's
Sorry, I just realized I'm hogging the mic a little bit, but all right, happy to start with the Europe one. Different market structures, to be honest, right? I know it's really exciting to read lots of press releases and white papers and announcements by European companies. To be honest, go talk to a European DSO and ask them how many of them have their hair on fire right now. No one there is happy, right? It's one thing to be a retailer with no obligation to actually manage the electric grid. It's just manage your order book on the back end for market ops. It's another thing to actually keep transformers not catching on fire, make sure feeders aren't sagging, make sure that substations don't have overloads. DSOs in Europe are not happy. DSOs in Europe don't have LinkedIn presences or Twitter presences or white papers. They're in much more pain. And I think that though, back to the point about common value framework, at least in Europe, one of the things that does allow for things like bidirectionality to take off is the fact that whether or not we're accounting for the pain suffered by DSOs, the distribution system operators, at least the retailers can say, look, there is a rate that I can export at that is common, whether it is battery storage or whether it is solar or whether it is bidirectional, EV. I don't think it's all the value they can deliver to the grid. I actually think it's missing the mark a lot, but the cost of energy is so high in Europe that generation value alone is a good enough reason to develop that rate and for people to just export. And again, there's a lot of studies starting to happen on what is the impact to the actual local grid in these moments. None of these projects have really gotten to like mass market scale, but yes, they are at greater scale than they are out here. So something is working there, I agree. But that's a common value framework. Here is a 30 cent per kilowatt hour export rate. That's a common value framework that everyone can be aligned around.
Hi, thank you so much for the panel. I'm Meredith Alexander with Gridwell Consulting. This question is, I wear an advocate hat, but I'm also a consumer. I'm on my 4th EV, and I've been really disappointed with how less or unintelligent the vehicles themselves are. I know some of you make charging solutions to put on the side of my house. So it doesn't matter how dumb the car is, but no offense to any OEM folks in the room, my last 2 EVs have gone backwards. My Kia was the most programmable, smart car I've had. My VW and my Honda have been dumber than that in 2019 Kia. And the other thing that is very confusing from a consumer, even someone, former policy director of CalStart, you cannot get information about the charging capabilities of the car when you are at the dealership. You're like Googling and going to all these circumspect websites and trying to find out the charging speed of this vehicle. There isn't a label. I understand CART might have that authority to make a charging label, but would be super curious in all of your perspectives on that. Thank you.
Any volunteers?
So many hot takes on this. Thanks.
Well, you can tell I'm going to pick on engineers for a second. You can tell the charging standards were developed by engineers. We have this J1772 connector, and then within that J1772 connector, the one at your house, there's all different power levels that could be served under that one standard. And there's no clarity on it for a consumer, like that doesn't relate to anything practical for a consumer. kW of a charger means nothing to a consumer. And when Apple first came out with the iPod, they sold it by how many songs the iPod could hold. And, you know, like even now they advertise when they sell a phone, how many hours, you know, like a phone can. And so I think it's unfortunate that like we haven't moved away from those technology standards that were actually developed by engineers in the Society of Automotive Engineers. And we haven't moved away to more consumer friendly language and ways to describe it. Now that's just on the power level. I think you might want to talk about other parts of this.
Oh, I mean, I
Yeah,
can actually say something here, so, yeah. Other projects that we've worked on, we've been quantifying the efficiency of the total charging pathway and comparing DC charging solutions and AC charging solutions and bringing in real world vehicles. The OBCs and their power densities it seems to be intentionally mysterious, and there's no way to figure it out without, in some cases, we literally just have to subject it to increasing AC input, and then you just figure out kind of where the charging rate caps out. So we've encountered that across the board in all the light duty fleet, and it's not clear why they don't want to make that easier to understand, or how to understand what type of charger you should pair with your EV. I think people are probably spending a lot of extra money oversizing their level 2 chargers in their garage, and their car isn't even able to make use of it. So it's definitely an issue, and I don't have an answer.
My only add is, I'm sorry. It's a disaster. I mean, just to be clear, we're trying to take 100-year-old companies and pretend that somehow they've got AI engineers. It's not happening. Like it's not happening, and they don't know how to market the value. I mean, a Super Bowl ad was really exciting. How many people can actually do that? Not many. And I think we're, you know, like we have to get back to the customer experience. And this is why, to the point earlier, like all the DERMs and all the mind integrations and all of those things are not speaking to the customer. And so we have to make that customer experience something that is really easy for you to experience day to day. Because unlike your smart thermostat, you've never named your smart thermostat. You've never kept your kids' crap in your smart thermostat. I do that all in my car. You know, my car has a name, my car has stuff in it. And I think about mobility a hell of a lot more. I paid for an Uber to come here, and I paid a lot more money to be here than I do my monthly power bill. So mobility actually has far more value to a consumer than energy, except when energy goes out. That's the point at which it goes up to infinite value for a customer. So I do think there's a lot to be figured out here on the consumer experience.
Hi, this is a question from online. What is being done in the field of large-scale battery disposal and recycling to prepare for when these EV batteries or BESS facilities reach the end of useful life?
I was actually on the last panel, right? Because that would have been a great question for that panel, and I'll expose my limited knowledge in this area here. But what I will say is which is you know, a good sign is that I forget the exact number, but I'm sure it's over 90%, if not more, of car batteries, that the traditional batteries that we've had in our vehicles are recycled. And so which is a much lower value kind of commodity that we're taking out of these vehicles. So I think I am aware of some things to recycle these things, but recycle the lithium ion batteries. I don't know if I could quote all the projects and things, so.
Yeah, one of our project partners, Dr. Jaewon Park at UC Davis, is a leader in Second Life battery applications, and that is kind of where he got to start, was Nissan Leaf battery packs. And what do we do with them now? And yeah, he's done tremendous work in that area. I know that electric scooters are a good area that he's been looking at, and yeah, solutions for other markets overseas. So yeah, I think that's a big opportunity, and people see it as such and are working in that area. So
I think we may have time for one more.
Hi there, I'm Gene Bonander, Executive Director of the California Streetlight Association. And I'm wondering if the panel would care to comment on the role of rate and tariff design in dealing with the great issues that you've raised, the bidirectional challenges, the time of use, the general rate case process in California, and its dynamics, and the value to the consumer as well as to entities like yourselves that are trying to manage new technologies coming along.
This is one of my favorites, so I'll jump in if that's okay. Road design is so critical. So my grandma lives in India, and back in the day, I had to call grandma on weekends and at night, and it was terrible because I don't like calling grandma only on weekends and at night. And that's what current rate design is. You're basically penalized and told you have to manage by charging off peak. And I mean, hot take, but I don't actually think that is a good approach for a consumer who wants their car to be driving to school, to driving to work, to go to the grocery store, God forbid, have to evacuate in an emergency. I think that the hedge risk of managing the cost of the system should be borne by the utility service providers like us and not by consumers. And I think increasingly with time varying rates, the more we move towards really dynamic rates, while it mimics parts of the bulk system, it does not solve the challenge on the distribution system. Increasingly, the distribution system is super heterogeneous, and the customer cannot solve what happens at their local transformer through a time varying rate. In fact, time varying rates exaggerate and cause a further problem on that part of the system. And so we have to find a way, and I say the word programmatically, but like we have to find a way to allow consumers to have a simpler experience, one where honestly it feels more like my current phone bill, where I pay $45 a month to AT&T and I don't really think about how much they curtail me every day, right? But they do. I go between 5G plus and 4G LTE and 5G, and I don't even notice, but I still have consistent service. And I think that to me is an idealized state that, particularly when I'm thinking about EVs, which are going to be the largest user if they're not already of electricity at the home, we need to get to somewhere where the rate design is reflective of a real consumer experience and not just of the cost to serve. And between the utilities and us, we'll figure out how we keep those costs low and in fact drive savings to everyone. But that's my soapbox. We can chat more offline.
I'll just do something super short. So our moderator is an important role at the CPUC. And they have a hard job because they're balancing a lot of priorities from a lot of different stakeholders. And so that's where a lot of the work goes on in these regulatory proceedings is they listen to the arguments for all these competing priorities and try and balance and find that balanced solution that can kind of like really move the state forward. So a lot of respect for the role that the commission plays, because it is really important role, because at the end of the day, we as consumers are all going to be the recipients of the decisions that are there. So thanks to them. Yeah. So
Commissioner Reynolds, do we have time for 1 minute for a comment from an OEM here? Thanks.
Sure.
Thanks. I actually wanted to respond to the construct of consumers actually having to work with these products. Fact of the matter is that OEMs do not have the incentive to be completely transparent. It's as simple as that. So, hi, I'm Chris Brown. I'm head of government affairs for Harbinger Motors, and I do not sell trucks. I like to lean into thought leadership. One of the nuances about battery design, about where the cells come from. For instance, we get our cells from Panasonic. They've recently onshored to DeSoto, Kansas, which we're really happy about. Is that you have the OEMs who have, well, the EV OEMs who have partnerships, great relationships with a multiplicity of partners. They cannot necessarily speak for those partners. We design our battery packs, we get our cells, but we do our packs, we do almost everything in-house, which is fantastic. But my CEO would not tell you, my CTO would not tell you the underlying facts about what our chemistry is, what our ultimate testing data is, because they probably don't really know. Because someone from UC Davis didn't actually test our batteries. We don't have the ability to really get to the hardcore, what can this do? And so we start, as OEMs, reducing our labor. We start making things as automated as possible. We make our cars dumber over time because we don't have an incentive to do better. What I would encourage you to do is speak to our amazing commissioners, speak to your legislators, and demand greater consumer protection from people like me. Thank you.
Well, on that wonderful note, please join me in thanking our fabulous panelists. Thank you all. Thank you all again for that great breakout session and appreciate the comment. I think that really goes to show the value of conferences like this, where we really are able to bring together these perspectives, tease out some insights, get some very real world anecdotes. So we are running just a couple minutes behind, but we're hoping to start our next session at 2:50, maybe a little bit after. The next panel in here will be focused on integrating climate data and electricity sector policy and planning. For those interested in utility project grid modernization, please head towards the second floor conference room. Again, we're hoping to start, it looks like maybe in about 10 minutes. So we'll say 2:55, 2:55. Thanks, everyone. No. We are now entering the second breakout session of the day. After that will be the final plenary. We're very close to the end, and we have continued exciting content before the end. So appreciate you all sticking around. Our next panel breakout session is again focused on how climate data, particularly generated through the EPIC program, is being integrated into electricity sector policy and planning. I think as we heard from this morning's breakout session, climate change is continuing to make it more difficult to fight climate change. So this data and modeling feels now more important than ever. And here to moderate this panel, I'm happy to introduce Aaliyah Becker-Lowe from the California Climate, she's the California Climate Assessment Program Manager at the Governor's Office of Land Use and Climate Innovation. Aaliyah.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm so honored and delighted to be on stage with these incredible experts that are really truly paving the way for how we are developing and packaging and leveraging climate data in the work that we do. So as mentioned, my name is Aaliyah Becker-Lowe. I work for the Governor's Office of Land Use and Climate Innovation. I have the incredible privilege of coordinating the state's fifth climate change assessment. And this is truly a community effort with many, many partners across the state. We work with the Natural Resources Agency, the Energy Commission, Strategic Growth Council, many experts, a couple on the stage here, across academia, tribal nations, community organizations, and so many more to help us understand what our climate future looks like and how we can leverage those resources to make informed decisions about how to build a more resilient future. So we're here to talk about today a component of that work. These three experts here are going to be sharing insights on how the continued development and integration of science and data into practice is so critical to achieving our zero carbon and resilient energy system future. The science and the research that is produced in this state really sets the foundation for our understanding of current and future climate risks and the vulnerabilities that we're facing. And we're exploring questions about how systems and communities across the state are going to be experiencing those impacts, how we're tackling events like wildfire, extreme heat, sea level rise, drought, flooding, and what we need to know to advance action on those issues. So the projections are a way to bolster our progress in answering those questions. They help us understand what our future looks like in ways that we can take action on. And with recent federal decisions to scale back funding for research and climate issues, our efforts to advance science at the state level are quickly growing in importance and value in the broader science community, including other states and nations. So we're very proud to be up here today to talk about this work. I want to acknowledge that the state is so grateful to the Public Utilities Commission and the Energy Commission and their many grantees and partners for prioritizing the development of these climate projections and data analytics. With huge thanks to over 20 years of funding from the EPIC program that have fueled this progress, the development of these resources have become a fundamental part of the state's climate portfolio. And this, as the science evolves and new projections are developed at an international level, we're able to improve and refine these resources to gain a clearer and clearer picture of what our climate future looks like. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So I'm very humbled to introduce you to these three colleagues who are helping blaze a path for a science-informed climate future and helping support the various communities that we're serving across the state. So they're each going to share a little bit of context about their work and discuss how the projections are developed, how they're being analyzed and packaged and disseminated and used to make the electricity system more resilient to climate impacts and other stressors, including rapid decarbonization and wildfire risks. So I would first like to introduce you to Dr. Julie Kalansky, who is a climate scientist with the Scripps Institute of Oceanography at UC San Diego. She is an author of one of the 5th climate change assessment reports, and she's on the team that generates the high resolution climate projections data for California. Next, we have Dr. Owen Doherty. He's a principal research scientist at Eagle Rock Analytics, and he's one of the main stewards behind the CalAdapt analytics engine, which makes the projected climate change data available through an innovative digital platform and including guidance on the use of those resources to energy sector users. And finally, Amber Mahone, who is a managing partner at Energy Environmental Economics Incorporated, E3, and she leads a team that updates key models used in energy sector planning to help inform a climate resilient transition to SB 100 goals of achieving a 100% clean energy future by 2045. This is truly a dream group to have this discussion with, and I will turn it over to Julie to share a bit about her portfolio, and we'll bring it back for a discussion.
Thank you very much. Oh, look at that. They just appear. For those of you that are here right after lunch, I hope I can convince you that this is as exciting as holding a blowtorch to my hand. And so the names that you see on this was the team that created the California climate projections, which are definitely state of the art and have a lot of research advancements in it. And California has one of the most robust set of climate projections of any region in the world. And so what you see here, the difference between these images really brings home why we need this downscaling effort in California specific climate projections. And so if you see the small image, that is what comes out of the global climate models, which is an international effort to develop a series of predictions of what the future might look like under different scenarios with greenhouse gases and land uses. What the EPIC support has enabled us to do is to take that and downscale it so you see that where it says 3-kilometer image that captures the regional topography. And as we know, topography really drives regional climate and weather. So the mountains, the valleys, and everything in between. And this project has enabled us to downscale from what the global models produce to the regional specific for California. If we could go to the next slide. And to do this, there were several steps that were part of it. The 2 main downscaling steps were one was done, which is called dynamically downscaling. And this is like what is weather models do to make weather forecast, right? They took the global climate models, they put it through this regional weather model and created, whether it's a big atmospheric river or a big Santa Ana event, and projected what that would look like across the state. And so that red box that you see in the middle is the domain that it covers at 3 kilometers. Dynamical downscaling is very computationally expensive. It's like a weather forecasting model to go out 100 years. And so it's not something that can be done for all the models, but the benefits of it are that you can get hourly data for many, many variables. It's what we call dynamically consistent because they're all done through a physically based model. And all the variables kind of work together. For the California assessment, there are 8 models that have been dynamically downscaled and are available. There are some slight differences that if you have questions about, I'm happy to answer between some that were bias corrected before versus bias corrected after. The other approach we took was a hybrid. It was statistically downscaled, and so it's not as computationally expensive and could do many more scenarios and many more models. And so this allows to comparison between different greenhouse gas scenarios, whether there's a large reduction, it's more business as usual, changes in land use. So there were 3 different scenarios that were able to be downscaled. More models, more of those global international models that were able to be downscaled. The downside of it is that we can't do as many variables because to do this downscaling, you need good observations, and we only have good observations of so many different variables. And so you can see on the bottom the list of the different variables that were downscaled. And these are done at a daily time step, except at a very few select locations where we have hourly temperature data. And then if you could go to the next slide. And then as a part of this project, there were additional information that was created. One is hydrologic projections. And so this is really, if you think about hydropower, needing to know what the stream flow would be, the river runoff, the snowpack, and how that can help with power generation from a hydroelectric standpoint. And the last one are extreme or hourly sea level projections. This isn't thinking about wave run up, but more if it's from a tide gauge. So if you could think about like a tide gauge to the ocean, how far up and down it goes. And this really helps with understanding the frequency of potential coastal flooding on electrical infrastructure. So through all of this, it's a really robust data set to examine how electrical infrastructure could perform under future different scenarios and potentially also the need depending on future climates. Great. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Next slide, please. Thanks. My name's Owen. I'm a climate scientist, and I have the privilege of serving as the PI for CalAdapt. And today I'm representing a very large team of scientists, programmers, social scientists across all these institutions who've worked hard on what I'm going to present here. Next slide, please. So at a really high level, the way that modelers of climate, like Julie, and energy system experts and specialists like Amber look at climate information are somewhat far apart. There's definitely a gap between the way that environmental predictions are made and how that information is consumed, either via subject matter or a utility or even in regulatory processes undertaken at state agencies. So the gap filling there, the connectivity between projections and use is a type of work referred to as climate data services. And in California, through the EPIC program, we're very fortunate to have CalAdapt, which serves as a provider of translation services between the two worlds. Next slide, please. So CalAdapt provides lots of different types of information.
depending on who you are, you want a different type of information. So for someone who's a really advanced user of information, you probably just want the climate data. You come into CalAdapt, you download the data, you say, thank you very much, you walk away. There are other users of climate information who might be intimidated by the large number of models that were produced for the fifth assessment. They're very early on in their journey and they just need help getting started. And so we try to provide useful information in many different ways, ranging from written guidance, which might help an early user, to advanced computer code, which walks step by step from a use case or application within California's energy system, starting with data and ending up with a product that is used within an energy system model. So providing access to data in many ways is really important for enabling a place where innovation and advanced practices in using climate data can occur. And I should note that recently the use of climate data became somewhat of a regulated process. CPUC rulemaking has laid out certain approaches which utilities should employ while doing things like vulnerability assessments or wildfire mitigation plans. And so at CalAdapt, all the tools and resources that we're building moving forward are being written in a way that sort of allows a user to arrive and receive climate information in a way that is consistent with CPC rulemaking. And so that's an important step forward for California, that we now have sort of outlines and, rules on how information should be used. Next slide, please. So if you want to connect climate with policy and planning applications, you really need a robust technical and scientific underpinning, a strong foundation that allows people to come in and take the next step, do something new and more challenging with climate information. And so we spend a lot of our time at CalAdapt through EPIC funding, building that strong foundation, making sure climate information is organized and processed and supported through guidance and training so people can innovate and take the next step. Next slide, please. And as Aaliyah kind of teed up for everybody, we're certainly experiencing challenges today associated with the kind of federal retreat from providing citizens with information and projections about future climate states. And that makes the work that's happening here in California all that much more important. Talking to utilities outside of California, they're scared and concerned because they've developed processes for long-term planning, and the data and information that they're using in these plans are going away. That's not happening in California, right? Users of climate information are confident that if they invest in new processes that move us forward towards a better grid, that the information they need will be there and reliably available to them. And that's through EPIC support. So we really like at CalAdapt being a reliable, long-term, trusted partner for a lot of users of climate information. And we think that situation which has been developed will really allow us as a community to move forward and tread new ground. So I will close with something that's near and dear to my heart, which I think is a big challenge for everyone in this room and everyone on Zoom to think about, which is how do we collectively build the capacity to use more and more better, higher fidelity climate information in planning and operations across California's electricity sector. I think it starts with a lot of the work that's going on through the EPIC program. And I hope we have a great conversation about it. So.
Great. Thanks, Owen. Well, that tees up my slides very nicely. My name is Amber Mahone with E3, and I am really the practitioner that is trying to use and apply all of the great climate data that these team members are producing. So what we're doing in our grant is we're taking the climate data and combining it with long-term scenarios of California's energy system and seeing how does that climate data change the portfolio of resources that we might build. So we're modeling a zero carbon future. California is still committed to achieving net zero by 2045, and that's going to entail big changes to the energy system. But just as we're trying to enact that major energy transformation, we also know that we're dealing with a changing climate. So next slide. There's a bunch of different impacts that we, could consider and could model. We can't do it all, so this slide kind of buckets what we are looking at. There's a bunch of impacts on the load side associated with changing temperatures primarily. So heating demand in the winter time, we see kind of going down, cooling demand, we see going up. That changes the seasonal and hourly load shape on the grid. We also are decarbonizing the grid. So we're seeing more electric heat pumps in buildings. We're seeing more electric vehicles on the grid as we talked about. So that all changes kind of the demand side of the equation. On the supply side, there's also changes. What we're taking from Owen's team is changes to solar generation, wind generation, and hydropower generation. And those have seasonal changes, particularly the hydropower is where we're seeing the biggest impacts from the climate scenarios and climate data. There's also some other impacts that are important around derates to thermal generation, efficiencies during high temperatures, for example. Transmission capacity is affected by temperature as well as battery charging is also impacted by temperature. We're not modeling smoke from wildfire aerosol impacts on solar PV. We're not modeling changes in the fuel supply that might occur as a result of climate. So there's, a broad range of things that you could consider that climate will impact. It will impact many aspects of life, but these are the three broad categories that we are able to model as part of this project. Next slide. So to kind of give the overview of what we're doing, again, we're taking the climate data that's downscaled, specifically solar, wind, hydro, and changes to temperature to model two key things. First is changes in demand on an hourly basis across the WEC. So we're not just modeling California, but we're also looking at how changes in the Western states may impact California. And then we're modeling what changes on the grid in terms of the least cost optimized portfolio. We're trying to assess energy resilience as well, which is a challenging topic, but we're looking at climate impacts to the resilience of the grid. And then the broad umbrella of what we're really trying to develop is a framework for how do we take all the climate uncertainty that's embedded in these scenarios and models and turn it into something that is actionable in the grid planning frameworks that we use in the state of California. Next slide. So I just wanted to give a few examples of kind of what this looks like on a practical basis to make it a bit more concrete. This slide shows historical temperature data and projected temperature data for one region that we're looking at, which is the Pacific Northwest, and it shows it by percentile. So the dark line across the middle is the 50th percentile or the average temperature. You can see that, there's a steady upward trend there. But most of the change and kind of variance that we see is in the 10th percentile and the 1st percentile, the 1st percentile of the data where there's a lot more variability. And so what we're working on is some methods to kind of capture that range and that uncertainty and turn that into metrics that we can model in our grid planning tools. So on the next slide, we've taken that weather data and now we've turned that into a forecast of peak demand. And so what we're showing here on the y-axis is gigawatts of demand. And this is a complicated set of charts, but this is for the Pacific Northwest in a decarbonized future where we have a lot of electric vehicles and heat pumps on the grid. So we're decarbonizing the grid and modeling the impacts of climate. And what we see when we compare the no climate scenario to the climate impact scenario is that the warmer winters kind of reduces the winter peak demand, the hotter summers increases the summer peak. So not an unintuitive result, but it's really interesting that we can quantify that. We also see big changes happening as a result of the net zero future that we're modeling, right? So the electrification of the grid is also a big driver of change over time. So, this isn't meant to be a complete summary of the whole work, but I wanted to give you kind of a very specific and concrete example of how we're using the climate data to inform the grid modeling. So this is one of the key inputs to that, which is how does peak demand change in the future? So I'll leave it there and look forward to discussing more with the panel.
Great. Thank you all so much. It's really inspiring to hear more. I've heard a bit about all of this work in the past, but every time I feel like I learn something and I'm just inspired by what we're building together to, improve our knowledge and make it actionable in ways that are really meaningful for the communities that we're serving. So we discussed a lot about how this data is developed, how it's packaged and disseminated, and a couple applications. I know we're just scratching the surface. There's so much more that these folks don't have time to share with us today. But that is the purpose of this partnership, and it's really exciting to see this group all together. And I think that continued partnerships and continuing to support this work is really the purpose of what we're here to discuss. So I have a few questions for the panel, and Julie, we'll start with you. I'm curious if you could help us just understand a little more clearly how these projections help us see into the future with sufficient resolution that understands our risks that the energy system faces. So what have we been able to accomplish, and what are some of the constraints that we've faced in the process?
I think one of the biggest accomplishments this time is, the prior assessment was at 6 kilometers, and so now going down to 3 kilometers, which we know especially for winds and some of the canyons, it can make a really, really big difference. And so it's half, but it's a huge change in terms of resolution and very impactful. Another, I would say, leap forward in this assessment and with these climate projections is that the statistical downscaling was able to use the dynamical downscaling as a basis. So prior, for statistical relationships, it was based on what we know. And so it's called this assumption of stationarity, this idea that those weather pattern relationships are stationary as climate changes. With this new set of projections and using the weather model, the dynamical downscaled projections, there wasn't that same assumption of stationarity. And so can really see, to your question, how that may be changing in the future. And that's new this time, and I think really novel way of producing projections, and is unique, as far as I'm aware, to California's projections. The other an important part of this too is what you talked about is the partnerships, and Owen has touched on this, but working with the analytics engines, they developed an amazing guidance on how to use the different projections, because there's so much data available, and how to use it really depends on what questions you're asking, right? This time around, the global models have the same model under the same scenario run with just slightly different changes at the beginning. And so this gets to the question of what is just more that natural variability within our system if we're going to have a really big storm or something, a really big event, versus how likely that is with climate change. And so there's so many more questions that can be addressed with the amount of data that's available this time. And I think it's really exciting. With that, I will say some of the little limitations, what we've seen is, so the dynamical models, those weather downscaled models, have hourly data, but it's limited in how much computation is available because it takes a lot to produce. Whereas the hybrid statistical downscaling is daily. And we've heard from the energy section how important it is to have hourly information. And so thinking about ways to do that in the future, I think is something with continued kind of research and development could really make the projections, all the projections, fit within some of the models that the energy sector has.
Yeah, thank you. That's a helpful context and really speaks to the point of highlighting that we've achieved a lot. There's a lot of great accomplishments in this work, but there's still an incredible need to continue to refine and build on what we've started. So on that vein, and the fact that California is doing this in a very unique way, Owen, I'm curious if you could share a little bit about your experience interacting with other states beyond California, and in the space of providing these kinds of data products to support decision making. So in other words, how is California playing a leading role at a national level, if not a global level, in this work?
I think Julie's answer was super humble because the advances that her team made in the fidelity and quality of information are incredible. And to watch utilities and state agencies in California realize what they can now do with this information has been the highlight of my professional career. And there's so much more that you can do with this next generation of data. A utility might need hourly inputs for load forecasting and also need to characterize an extreme event like a 1 in 1,000 year flood to understand how their assets are exposed to climate change. And the beautiful thing about the data that has been produced is the WRF data gives you that hourly forecast for load. And then the LOCA data has so many simulations that you can really get into what's the probability of a rare event. And that does not exist outside of California. The capacity that this new data has created is really here. It's in the Western United States, and it's nowhere else. And a second consideration there is the state has put a lot of thought into, well, making the data and making it available simply is not enough to create a space where innovation can happen. The users need to be supported with information, guidance, and examples of how common applications across the energy sector can use this information. You don't have to rebuild the wheel every time. We've made incredible progress. And when I talk to people outside of California, there was a lot of hope that NOAA was moving towards a national climate data servicing approach and that there would be CalAdapt-like resources available nationally. That's not the case in the next couple of years, at least. We probably won't see that. So California has created a data ecosystem which is unique. It's high quality. The users are supported in their journey. And I think that has put the opportunity in front of everyone in this room to think about how can my organization take advantage of this incredible richness of information. People outside of California are looking forward to their turn to have information like this. And so it's just really great what Julie's team has accomplished in this round of research.
Thanks so much, Owen. Thank you, Julie. And Amber, you are really putting all of these resources to work on the ground. And so we're really grateful for that example and that model of how we can leverage these resources. So as you're moving forward in your work, could you help us understand, you kind of sit at this nexus of resilience and mitigation. Help us understand what new challenges are coming up in ways that are both limiting climate change, so reducing our emissions, while simultaneously adapting to a changing climate to endure the future events.
Yeah, it's been incredible to have the opportunity to dig into those questions in a very quantitative way. And I think, we're still learning, but what I can share, what we're seeing so far, we know that resource adequacy, the availability of capacity when we need it on the grid is going to continue to be a challenge in a climate-informed future. So, one of the things we're really taking a close look at is the intersection of changing loads with changing resource availability. I think as we electrify the grid, we're expecting to see an increase in loads in the wintertime. We have fewer solar and wind resources during constrained periods in the winter. And we're looking at how hydro availability may change. So, one of the things that we're starting to see is kind of emerging challenge in terms of the winter peak, which in California historically has not been a problem, right? California is a summer peaking system. It's driven by air conditioning loads. And so, that's kind of one of the shifts that we're expecting to see over the next, 10 to 15 years, that as resource planners, we can start thinking about now as we start procuring long-term resources.
Thank you. Appreciate these great comments. So I want to give you all a chance to brag a little bit about something that you're especially proud of in your work, or conversely, what challenges are coming up and how have you learned, how have you gained some wisdom that would help inform some of our partners in the audience today. And it's, open bag, anyone can jump in here.
I'll give it a go. Our hope was when we started this most recent push on CalAdapt, well, if we put really good data out there and some training materials and show folks how it can be done, that'll be enough. We'll put people in a position to succeed and they'll go forth and do amazing things. And one of the challenges that we've been really surprised is we've met with a wide range of users of this information, and from the most sophisticated, best computer programmers to maybe a really small municipally owned utility, everyone's like, no, sit here with us and help us do this work. Like, sit with us, tell us how it's been successful elsewhere, show us where we're kind of going off course. How do we pick these models? I see you've given us guidance, but no, work with us on the ground. And that was shocking to us. I probably shouldn't have been. But the amount of time that it takes to connect with groups on a face-to-face, help them on their journey has been astounding and humbling and wonderful. And we're really lucky that through Epic, we're able to spend time with people and help them develop within their organizations the capacity to use this information. So that's been a novel challenge for us, for sure.
I'll just jump in as one of the people that Owen has helped in this journey. I will say it is daunting to look at these climate models because there's so many different scenarios. The data itself is vast. We are used to interpreting historical weather data and applying that, but the forecasted weather data is 10x more complicated in a lot of ways. So it really is helpful to have a translation from the climate scientist to the practitioner. And I'm proud that we've been able to sort of take a step in that direction, and incredibly proud and honored that we get to continue working on these scientific questions and on climate change and on adaptation and mitigation. You can't say that everywhere, and it's really been an honor to be a part of that.
I'm going to continue the thread on the partnerships and the engagement. The way the award periods were set up, the original weather downscaling was done because it was needed for everything else. But through the engagement, we realized there were certain variables that were really needed. And so shifted a bit to make sure that additional set of models were downscaled in that way, dynamically downscaled with additional variables. And that wouldn't have happened without the active engagement. I would say even within the team, we had climate scientists, we had meteorologists, we had hydrologists, and within that, having expertise in different fields, I think really helped with the validity of the data. And even at times realized by somebody testing it, there was something that needed to be redone. And so it was really the partnerships externally and internally that created solid, good, usable data, which is so important.
Thank you. Well, I want to save some time for questions from the audience, but I'll close with just one final question for you all on my part, and just a huge thank you for sharing about your work and helping us understand the complex and very interrelated nature of the work that you do. It truly takes a village to produce, meaningful information and to help us achieve a climate resilient future. And so you're modeling, a great first step in achieving that, and it ripples beyond this state, no doubt. So I want to think about the future and what else we need to advance this work. So as CPUC and the CEC are considering future investment opportunities to advance the EPIC program's impact, what types of investments do you see as being most important to advancing this public program and to achieving California's energy-related policy goals?
Yep. I'll take a stab at it first. Coming from a data perspective, California has always really led the way in climate projections. From the last set, the CMIP 5 projections, to this set, we've seen huge advancements from the international community in what's been done. But then through the EPIC investment has really been able to leverage those and make those usable for California and the IOUs in the energy sector. And so that continued investment as the global community moves forward in their modeling capabilities, to be able to then take that and make it as valuable as possible and provide robust state-of-the-art climate projection data for the state is critical.
And I'll underscore what I think Owen said earlier, which is just having the data publicly available is absolutely essential. And knowing that it's going to be available into the future is the first step. I think there's also still a lot more that we need to do as we get comfortable using the climate-informed data in the very practical nuts and bolts planning processes that the state takes, everything from transmission planning to long-term resource planning to the IPR. There's so many different places that this data could be applied, but it really does take thought and time and conversations to make sure we're doing it in a way that's responsible, that is able to distinguish the signal from the noise. That's kind of one of the key takeaways I've had, is knowing what signal and noise is not always obvious. So I think just using the data more and getting experience there is where I would emphasize next steps.
I think your earlier point about translating and having that translation role to really connect the different parts is really key in that conversation as well. So appreciate that. Owen.
I would just add along that same thread, we have hinted at the use of temperature in lots of applications within the energy sector. But when you meet with and spend time with the humans who are doing this work, you realize that actually we do not know exactly how this information is being consumed. And so one of the things that we've been doing has been meeting with the climate resilience teams from each of California's IOUs and some major POUs every month. And we have conversations like, so how exactly do you think about a 3-day heat wave? What is the temperature data that goes into those predictions? And the cross conversation that we have between utilities of saying, well, actually, we're using a 3-day running mean, or no. What we need is the peak 1 hour temperature within that three-day period. Those are fascinating conversations. And what comes out of that is advancement. Is from those conversations, we then build code and tools which do the types of approaches that utilities are using. We make them open and transparent so that everyone in California can access and see how the sausage is being made. And that drives the next level of progress, because once it's made public and we've all talked about it, you can see which methods are working and which aren't. And it leads to the next conversation, which might be about, well, is this consistent with CEC demand forecast projections or CPUC hyper proceedings, right? And that sustained conversation is exhausting. It requires incredible amounts of person hours, but it really does advance our general capability to have a responsive grid to climate change. So that's the sort of work I want to see keep happening, because I can see a path towards a really well climate informed future grid if we can keep doing those hard conversations.
Thank you. Thank you all. I believe we can turn it to the audience for some questions now, and I'll look to my colleagues. Great, we have a question here, and I think we have a mic coming your way. While we get there, great. Thank you.
Hi, Dan Potash, independent consultant. So I can understand that the models are getting better and the data is getting more granular. And I was trying to think of what decisions would be made based on these more advanced models. And everything that came to mind was expensive and was going to cost more. So reinforcing the grid or building a seawall or raising a road or doing everything. So is there any insight that came out that was optimistic or positive, like more wind generation or more solar or anything in the agricultural sector that was not a downer?
It's funny, we just finished the San Diego report, and I think my optimism doesn't come from the projections so much, because they can be gloomy. My optimism comes from seeing what everybody's doing to help build resiliency to them and preparing and planning for it. So I'm just thinking about San Diego because it's what's top of mind, but in a 100-page report, we barely scratched the surface of everything the different communities are doing to think about what resiliency looks like. And then now, in the last assessment, right, it was the planning or the vulnerability assessments, but now we're actually starting to see implementation. And so the projections provide the information, the uncertainty, and not everything right now is super big, right? We have some time to test different adaptation strategies. Some are less expensive, some are super expensive, but we can see where the limits are and when you may need to transition or when it's needed to transition to a different one. So that's where my hope comes in. And admittedly, after doing this report, I have a lot of hope, which is you often don't hear a climate scientist say, I feel like.
All right, Dan Burgoyne with the Department of General Services. And we've been working with state agencies to plan out climate adaptation for state facilities for a number of years now. One disconnect I've seen, and this is wonderful data, and it's great to hear that we have updated data that's even more accurate, is how does this get put into the building codes that plan out our future buildings? We're building new buildings all the time. You look around us, they are based on historic climate data that is going into the codes, yet we're now 20 years into the future and looking further ahead and putting in systems that will last 20, 40, 50 years. How do we get this into the codes so that the buildings that are being designed across the board are set to adapt to those climates?
Well, I think the good news is that energy efficient buildings are also more climate resilient. Building code measures that are wildfire hardening are also more climate resilient. So, whether we are yet incorporating climate data into the building code, I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that a lot of the changes that we're making in the code to enhance energy efficiency, resiliency will also benefit us in a changing climate.
And I can add to that, the building standards folks at CEC are super aware that these projections exist. There's a translation gap that we need to overcome from the model outputs to the very specific energy files that will go into building design software. And hopefully by the end of this year, the first version of these climate informed building standard input files will be available on CalAdapt. So I think there is a path forward for incorporating climate data into building standards and planning applications. It's hard though, because the models are all finely tuned to historical observations, usually taken at airports, and climate models predict something slightly different when they're run. So I don't think it's going to be a quick fix, but there's definitely progress and hope and, I can see the steps that will go, and I think we have the data to support those steps. So someone asked about optimistic things. There's something I'm hopeful for. I do see progress there.
And I'll just add a somewhat shameless plug as well that, the fifth assessment as mentioned is, foundational to the assessments research are these data products. And so what we're hoping to do as we roll out the final materials next year is to have these conversations with the decision makers and the various users that need access to these resources and to package it in ways that's useful, that'll help us make informed and better decisions about, building codes, about, the way we're responding to various events, housing, et cetera. So there's a long road ahead. We're eager to have more conversation about that and learn what you think is the best path as well. Do we have other questions from the audience? Anybody online? Oh, I think we've got one in the room here.
The building standards software will incorporate the future data, but I think it's going to be for the 2028 version of the software. The upcoming 2025, unfortunately, still has the traditional data files. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments in the room? I see one in the back.
Yeah, and I didn't get to catch everything, but I'm keep staring at electricity sector planning and policy, which impacts everything. So my daughter's been working on some of this in her master's thesis, but it's like, how about the cross-sector impacts that this has? I'm just kind of curious, like when industry can't do what it's supposed to be doing, when logistics can't do what it's supposed to be doing, because the power sector has these issues or moments, are you looking at how that all ties together and the impacts in recovering resilience?
So if I'm understanding your question, the question is about, how, these data products are informing cross-sectoral, issues, progress, questions that we have about our energy future.
Whatever. Like, so how are you tying this back to the sectors that the power sector supports? I'm just kind of wondering, is there any other, is this going into other directions that says like, okay, and therefore our GDP is going to go down until we recover our power sector? Or I'm just kind of checking, poking around, is there something deeper beyond just supporting the power sector itself?
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so the focus of our modeling and research is on the power sector. We are modeling the West and the Western grid. So there are examples of kind of cascading failures on the grid across the West that we're capturing, but we're not trying to model, for example, an incident like in Texas with Hurricane Yami, when you had the gas system freeze and then the gas generators couldn't operate. Or we've seen examples where coal stacks have frozen and the coal plants can't operate because of extreme weather conditions. So we are not currently incorporating other fuel supply chain disruptions that could occur as a result of extreme weather. I think, there's some interesting examples there that could be explored in sort of a resiliency case study basis, but it's not the focus of our research at the moment.
Trickle down economics is a scam, but maybe trickle down resiliency is not. If we can build a reliable and safe and cost-effective grid by incorporating climate projections, I think that will ultimately benefit all Californians and many other sectors. But in terms of quantifying that, that's a homework assignment. That's next level.
Well, thank you. I think that's all the time that we have for this panel. I want to just again reiterate my thanks for your time, for these three incredible panelists who are really working, tirelessly to, achieve our collective goals for the state. And I encourage you to come meet with them. They're really. We just scratched the surface and there's so much more that I know that they would love to share with you. So come find them after this panel. But please, at the moment, join me in thanking them for their time and for sharing about their work.
Thank you so much, Aaliyah, panelists. As we now head into our final plenary of the day, which starts in about 10 minutes, it'll be starting just around 4 o'clock. That'll be focused on entrepreneurial stories, specifically crossing the valleys of death. So that'll be starting in about 10 minutes. Feel free to take a little break, a little stretcher. It is the final plenary session of the day. So I really want to thank you all for sticking it through and seeing the last content we have to offer. Thanks, everyone. All right. Welcome to the final plenary of the day. This event is scheduled to end at 5 o'clock, and so this panel will run. But before we begin, and as folks begin to trickle back in the room from the second floor conference room, we're going to show you our final video from the day from one of our EPIC grant recipients, Go Power EV. So if we could cue the video before we begin the panel, it'll be the last video for the day, and then we'll get started with the plenary.
% zero-emission vehicle sales by 2035. Today, there are over 2 million EVs on California roads, but fewer than 5% are parked in apartment buildings, even though 40% of Californians live in multifamily housing. Expanding access to charging at every type of home is critical to meeting these ambitious goals. Installing EV chargers in multifamily housing today often requires capital costs and grid infrastructure upgrades, such as distribution transformers or electrical switchgear. These projects can take up to 18 months to complete. Utilities, municipalities, property owners, and residents want to maximize use of the existing and often underutilized grid infrastructure, but no solution has existed to dynamically manage load at the distribution transformer level. No Power EV's automated load management solves this problem. It continuously monitors the transformer's capacity in real time and adjusts net EV charging load to ensure safe operations. By doing so, automated load management enables many more charges than a static load study would permit. As an example, a standard load study may only allow 5 level 2 EV chargers to be installed. With automated load management, up to 35 level 2 EV chargers could be installed using the same transformer. This allows utilities and municipalities to add EV charging capacity immediately without waiting for costly transformer or switchgear upgrades. With automated load management, utilities can meet surging EV charging demand years faster than previously possible, supporting electric transportation whilst also increasing electricity sales. Go Power EV is a California-based clean energy company transforming EV charging in multifamily housing. Our mission is to make charging affordable, scalable, and resident-friendly. Our low-power smart outlet can charge 2 vehicles simultaneously. The 2-step upgrade path lets properties start with low-cost ready base units and easily upgrade to powerful outlets as demand grows. We've removed the key barriers to multifamily EV charging, and our technology powers some of the largest retrofit installations in California today.
All right, well, I wanted to show that video as we head into this next and final plenary session focused on the entrepreneurial journeys crossing the valleys of death. This is a particularly core part of the EPIC program. We're especially looking at the time scale of how some of these companies evolve. Sometimes the best funding is consistent funding, and so we're hoping to highlight some of that today. And so I'd like to now introduce John Bonanno from Factor. But before I begin, could I get a round of applause for John for our sponsor today? He provided the morning coffee. If you're here an alert because of a cup of coffee today, thank you, John, for that. And with that, yeah, I'll pass it over to John for the. He's on.
Do I need to do? Okay. Hey, thank you all for making it to 4 o'clock. Well done. We had a pretty good sugar ingestion earlier, but everyone hasn't crashed yet, which is very nice. I think that great thanks are due to the good work that the CEC has done for this event. I mean, I see Anthony here and Fritz and the team, Rebecca, Rachel. The chairman this morning had a great opening comment. The work that our Energy Commission is doing for Californians in service of Californians is tremendous, and it should be acknowledged right at the top. So the other thing is, Factor's been involved with supporting clean economy entrepreneurs for a very long time. I take this very seriously. I'm a survivor of 9/11, so I've experienced the violence of the fossil economy firsthand. And so all these products that we've heard about all day are things that are superior, that don't require those inputs. And so we defund the violence by creating superior products and services. We are an advisor and we support people on winning grants and raising capital and all sorts of other stuff. But the work at its core is about outcomes. We want to see products and services that align, honestly, very closely with the CEC's initiatives. And it's important to understand that these programs are funded by ratepayers, right? So it's ratepayer dollars going into a separate fund that then gets allocated into things that are directed by the programming. Some entrepreneurs to acknowledge that aren't on stage that almost just burned my hand off, which I'm so grateful for, is Patricia McNeil from Westwood Aerogel just put a torch on my hand and it didn't burn it because of her amazing thermal material. If you haven't seen this, go talk to her. She's awesome. Also, Jared, who left a little while ago, Siren Ops is another great entrepreneur here, figuring out how we're going to talk a little bit more about quality with Shoju, but having the ability to deliver high quality products is also critical. Because in a lot of cases, especially in energy, you don't get to say something after you've just screwed it up the first time. So quality control, quality assurance, is absolutely essential in everything we're doing. So we're going to talk a little bit more about it, but I just wanted to acknowledge Jared as well. So a lot of people in the national dialogue around energy right now are really questioning whether public financing interventions in energy innovation is effective. So I'm a capitalist, I'm a venture capitalist from time to time, and there is no investment class that you can make a $1 investment and get $10 in return. Has anyone seen that before? Put up your hand if you have. You haven't, because it doesn't exist. This is the results of the EPIC programming. One single municipal dollar is turning into $10 of catalyzed capital towards the things that we all want to see. That's an extraordinary best use of capital by the municipal actor. And we should celebrate that and not cower away when someone says, oh, you know, we at the Department of Energy don't want to be funding these projects anymore. Or whatever. It's nonsense. The facts are bare. And we need to defend these programs. And we need to support and enhance and enlarge these programs. And we're at a moment right now where EPIC 5 is being considered by the legislature, by the PUC, by the CEC. What are we going to do next? Is it going to get bigger? Is it going to get smaller? I say, best investment you can ever make. So you are individual ratepayers in the state of California, a majority of you, I'm assuming. This is exactly what we need to advocate for. More EPIC funding. More digging in deep on the things we believe in around clean generation, around cleaning up our air, around electrifying our homes and our mobility. These are critical elements that make our lives superior, but don't continue to fund the violence of the fossil economy. So you all need to understand this about where the money comes from, how the program works and stuff, because it's at a pivoting moment here where we're going to decide what the next 5-10 years are going to be around this programming. So advocate is what I have to say about that. And you know it works because all you got to remember is 1 to 10. Invest $1, get $10 of impact. Do it all day long. Okay. You also have to understand that, and this is funny because imitation is the greatest form of flattery. If you look at the programming at NYSERDA in New York, if you look at the program at the Department of Energy over the last 4 years, it has literally been a reflection of what we've done here in California, which is progressive funding. You start with something small. That program's called CalSeed, and they want you to do something called Concept. Concept is $150K non-dilutive to the entrepreneur. With the winners, they step them up, meaning people that execute properly, deliver results and all this sort of stuff, like it actually works. They do something called CalSeed Prototype. 150K. Progression, step up. Support your winners, okay? 450K non-dilutive to go and build something. Show us that it's true. Show us that it's true, okay? The next is test bed. So this was an interesting one because this was the CEC with UC Regents partnering to create a national lab network within the state of California to go and test stuff out. Because no one believes entrepreneurs. Yeah, sure, it's going to do all this stuff and no one believes you. If you have Berkeley National Lab or Riverside or a proper facility testing this and verifying, it's like having an independent engineering report. You can win up to $300,000 through that program. That's a voucher redemption program. Super smart by the CEC. Next program up, $4 million of the top win on that one. It's a grant, non-dilutive. The program's called Bridge. Okay, get it out, make it bigger, expand your team, do the things that you need to do, build your business here in California. Final, at least today's programming, final level, ramp. Now they all have acronyms meaning something like blah, 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 something. But ramp is about building manufacturing capacity. And it can be MPI, it can be new product introduction. No one's saying you have to do sort of Uber scale production here in California, but MPI. And that you can win up to $3 million. So right here, collectively, if you do this program in progression with success, you're talking nearly $10 million of non-dilutive capital that help you on your journey. So part of covering the gaps of the Valley of Death is a public-private partnership that works. And it is unequivocally true that this program works, should be supported, should be expanded. Okay, now I get to shut up. All right. What are the core values of the PUC CEC? Number one, affordability, lower everyone's bills. Do the things that these guys are working on help ratepayers pay less for the energy services they want? All of them do. And you're going to find out how they do it. Second thing, build resilience, reliability, and safety. No fire. Please. It's fantastic. Okay. Reduce emissions, make our air clean. Don't keep on screwing up the world so that we have, more extreme weather. Final is accessibility, include community, right? These are the values that the CEC shares. You're going to find that all of these entrepreneurs throughout what they're going to talk about are going to be talking about these things. The value of the progressive programming, because all are multiple stage winners. They're going to talk about the values that the CEC shares around everyone gets to access this. We're going to bring down their costs. These are the kind of things. So I'm going to have them pick up their mics now, and everyone gets to introduce themselves but this is not an infomercial moment. This is what we're going to do here is you're going to obviously state your name and your role, but you're also going to say what you do for whom and why. I did this time in New York Climate Week on the penalty. So Chris Graves, let me help you out. Chris Graves, CEO of Noon Energy.
Yeah, thanks, John. Everyone, yeah, Chris Graves, co-founder, CEO, Noon Energy. So what Noon does first, maybe, yeah. Yeah. Okay.
What you do for whom and why.
Oh, okay, great, perfect. So Noon has developed an ultra long duration energy storage system, highly differentiated and complementary to regular batteries, designed to turn intermittent solar and wind power into clean, firm, 100% reliable electricity. So I guess the why is probably the low cost, abundant electricity for everyone, clean and all that. We're also supposed to say which grants we got, I guess. Is that true or no?
Yeah, because you are progressive winners. So yeah, talk.
Yeah. So tremendous CEC support over the years. We actually got our start out of the Activate program just before any CEC awards. And then we had a CalSeed award and then CEC Bridge, which was critical for building through prototype stages to the first containerized demonstration system, and then a Cal Test Bed Award, and then finally one that we call LIDAC, which is low income and disadvantaged communities deployment of a larger system. So, yeah.
Awesome. Justin.
Thanks, John. Hi, my name is Justin Briggs. I'm one of the co-founders of Antora Energy. So at Antora, we make thermal batteries for industrial decarbonization. So these are large steel boxes about the size of a shipping container that are full of blocks of graphite, just like the pencil lead in your pencil. And we use excess clean electricity to charge those batteries up to very high temperatures by just heating the carbon blocks. And then we can deliver that stored energy as industrial heat or industrial electricity to manufacturers around the clock. The reason we're doing this, to respond to the prompt, is to try to have the biggest bite out of climate change that we can. When we started the company, we did not have a particular technology in mind or a particular product in mind. We started with the question, if we're going to work on something for years of our lives, what would have the largest possible positive impact on human well-being? And this is what we came up with after many months and actually years of thinking through that question. We were also really fortunate, much like Chris, to benefit from a whole slew of CEC support, including the Activate Fellowship, the CalSeed program, a demo grant, which is similar to the Bridge grant, and a RAMP grant to support our manufacturing.
Super.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, John. I'm Shorja Viswas. I'm the CEO, CTO, and one of the co-founders at Liminal Insights. So what we do is essentially provide inspection and intelligence solutions to battery manufacturers. So we do this with ultrasound and machine learning in order to provide sort of these insights around quality of battery cells and enhance the performance, as well as improve the yield and cost of battery cell manufacturing. Why this is impactful is, when we started back in 2015, we invented this technology which does inspection using ultrasound on battery cells back at Princeton during my postdoc. And then we spun the company out in 2016, moved out here to the Bay Area as a part of the Activate Cyclotron Road program. At that time, there were so many sort of failures that we were seeing in the field from batteries. The Note 7 from Samsung, that was a huge deal back then. And when we were going out to conferences, academic conferences, and presenting this sort of new technology, the most interest that we got was from industry folks. So Apple sent cells to us at Princeton, Motorola, and so many others, right? Like and Boeing at that time sent cells to us because the quality and the safety factor was such a big deal that they needed additional sources of doing QA/QC. And so we spun the company out with that vision. We're still following through with it. Now that these cell manufacturers are ramping up to meet the demand for EVs and ESS, it is so much more critical that safety and reliability is top of mind. So that is what we are trying to address.
Grant, you've won.
Oh, yeah. So, in 2018 or 2019, we got the Cal Seed Award. No, sorry, Cal Test Bed, and we worked with UC Davis at that time, and it was really impactful. We also got the Bridge in order to sort of prove out the technology. And at the end of Bridge, we were deploying our first inline system at a gigafactory. And then we got the RAMP Award, and now we are scaling our manufacturing in-house in order to deliver these systems.
Thank you. Vince?
I'm Vince, co-founder, COO of Electric Fish. We build fast EV chargers that double as generators for grid-constrained fleets and retail stores. This is a problem that we've been working on for nearly 6 years at this point. As we all know, transportation remains one of the biggest sources of emissions in the state of California. And one of the surefire ways we can tackle that problem is by incentivizing and encouraging and supporting more EV infrastructure. But that becomes really challenging when we think about the problems of grid infrastructure, which we've heard about at length today. These same problems that we set out to solve initially about 5 years ago or 6 years ago have compounded because of all the advancements in AI, data centers, everything that's gobbling up share in the interconnection queues. And so this problem of deploying EV charging infrastructure has only gotten harder because you have less and less capacity actually available. But as vehicle technology improves, folks are wanting higher performing charging to accommodate their higher voltage EVs. And so what is typically a multi-year process of deploying, interconnecting, installing charging that's fast, we are able to condense down to just a few weeks. In some cases, we've deployed and commissioned our chargers for operation right off the flatbed. We have a containerized system that's very easy to deploy and redeploy. We have a trailer mountable version that's fit for use cases like supporting utilities, but also first responders, even the entertainment sector where you want that level of flexibility. And these dual port systems are also able to provide backup power, not just for EVs, but also for the sites that they serve. We're working with a tribe in New England where they want to reclaim their energy sovereignty by reducing their own dependence on the grid and ensuring that mission critical operations serving their community can stay online. This sort of use case is something that we're now trying to replicate here in California. And there's also, with this battery storage capability, the ability to keep energy costs low. We have this software embedded in the charger that's able to provide peak demand management services so that we're able to shift our energy consumption to more cost advantage cost advantageous hours of the day to then lower the cost of electricity and therefore the burden on ratepayers, both commercial and consumer. We have been really fortunate to have partnered with the CEC on a number of opportunities. So we started out like some of my fellow panelists with CalSeed. This was something we won in 2022. This helped us determine basically how we can flexibly integrate with both high voltage and low voltage grids. Of course, many of our customers that are highly grid constrained, they only have 208 volt infrastructure, for instance. They need something that can be reverse compatible with what they have without prompting those 100K plus transformer upgrades. So CalSeed was really pivotal in helping us understand that we could work with both high voltage and low voltage sites. We then won RAMP in 23, which enabled us to basically move out of this garage that we had in Fremont to an 8,000 square foot state-of-the-art manufacturing facility where we've invested into specialized equipment. We've brought in net new 2 full-time jobs with centering folks from disadvantaged backgrounds. And it's allowed us to build our works like commercial scale units. We sold our first commercial sale out of that facility. We've done a number of really other exciting projects as well, which have now set us up for the most recent CEC award, not from Epic, but from a different division called FAST, which hasn't been gaveled. It was just announced a couple of months ago. But it's going to be entailing the deployment of 10 of our units across the Bay Area in disadvantaged communities that face a high pollution burden. And so we're really excited about not only that opportunity, but just reflecting back on the impact that Epic has had, not only within the Epic ecosystem, but other parts of the CEC and attracting other funders in other states and in the private sector as well.
So how many people drive an EV in this room? Put your hands up. Good. Would you say, put your hand up if you think it's a superior experience driving an ICE vehicle? Okay, 100%, that's good. Do you think that low-income people deserve that same superior experience? Okay, great, that's all. That's awesome. So what you're hearing is about access, right? These superior products will serve everyone in California. This is not shifting an expensive burden to someone else. All of these little innovations are improving that everyone gets that chance to have a superior experience without the fossil. So that's an important through line here. And all of these folks share it and they live it and they deliver it to their customers. So it's very important. Now, as you're building a business, capitalizing your balance sheet to achieve the next milestone can be challenging. I almost say it tongue in cheek because it can be, you can lose a lot of sleep over it. All of these folks have had to achieve this. So the next thing I want to talk about, and I'm going to start with you, Vince, is we've talked about progressive grant programming. And it would be really helpful to illuminate, because there are entrepreneurs in the room that have maybe won a first stage of grant and looking at the next stage of grant, or maybe they've never won a grant. How important and how did you manage through those gaps? Because we're supposed to be talking about valleys of death, because there are multiple valleys, not one. Talk a little bit about your personal journey around how those interjections or intersections between the municipal actor and your private capital allocators or your customers or other relationships that it really just changed and moved in a different direction.
Very simply put, John, we wouldn't be here today. There were so many stages in our journey so far where we've had to cross that valley of death. And without that very critical non-dilutive funding, it just simply would not have been tenable. We've talked at length personally about the capital stack and diversifying it. I mean, we certainly have had the privilege of working with a number of really great angel syndicates, some accelerator programs, and some smaller VCs. But a lot of them have actually decided to invest because they saw the investment from the CEC as that de-risking signal, right? It itself is not sufficient, but it is necessary to see that, you have regulatory support, you have the policy support for the technologies we're trying to advance, and how this translates to real world impact. I mean, we just deployed, so we're based in San Carlos. For those of you who don't know, it's in the peninsula near Redwood City. We just deployed a very successful project in the Mojave Desert with Hyundai at their testing center. They have very extensive charger utilization. They wanted to basically determine that a system like ours could work uninterrupted in 100-degree plus weather days on end. And you can imagine that their power bill is probably enormous. So not only did we achieve 99% plus uptime of the system itself, which compared to some of our earlier systems, it's like a multiple of our uptime, right? But thanks to things like Halcyon and Ramp, it's not possible. We were actually able to save approximately 4 times on demand charges of what they would have seen had they not implemented a battery integrated charger like ours to operate their vehicle charging needs. And so that's pretty staggering when you think about.
You just said 4x reduction.
Yeah, in demand charges relative to what their SCE bill was going to forecast had they just done BAU charging. And on the upfront, there was a CapEx savings of around $74K of being able to implement a system like ours, diverting or averting those grid transformer upgrades. And then again, that's significant time savings. So being able to shrink down what is typically a multi-year process down to just multiple weeks. One thing we don't talk about enough is the opportunity cost. It's not just the cost of CapEx, but if you don't have that charging soon or now, you're basically stuck with the more expensive and polluting diesel alternative for those number of years. So that's something that we typically bake into the cost equation as well.
Yeah, perfect. Now, I'd like you to describe your personal journey as a co-founder of this organization, looking at the analytics that make batteries better quality, but also talk about how the CEC supported you in terms of visibility across other municipal organizations. Maybe it's nationally, maybe it's internationally, because you're about to get on a plane to go to an international location where they're making batteries, and they're saying, this is valuable to us. California has just exported world-class technology to world-class battery manufacturers. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think similar to what Vin said, I don't think Liminal as a company would have survived without CEC funding. We've been through multiple valleys of deaths, right? So we raised our first seed round in 2019, and then we had a certain runway, and then COVID hit. All of our customers that we were going to do pilots with just suddenly disappeared, right? We still had to operate through that, and we still had the same burn as we did before, and we didn't have any customers. We didn't have any sort of cells to test on, right? And that's when bridge funding really helped us essentially, and CalTestBed as well, that we had access to UC Davis's facilities in order to test ourselves and then and make sure that what we were predicting as defects actually manifested as defects during cycling. So it was a transformative sort of case study that we put together when, as we came out of COVID, that we had something to show. And then with Bridge as well, it was so hard to get any sort of funded projects with companies that we were with our customers, right? So our customers were either other battery manufacturers within California, and these were mostly startups. They didn't have too much funding, and or they were large companies who were looking at us as a new technology coming out with something completely innovative, and they didn't trust us, right? So in order to get proof points, nobody would give us the chance, right? So we started offering free pilots. We went to their facilities, we deployed our systems, we collected data from their cells, we ran our analytics, and we showed them what we can do. And that was funded by the bridge funding. And it was transformative, right? So once we had enough proof points, we attracted Northvolt, and then we did a pilot with them in Sweden. We deployed 2 of our offline systems over there. And then within 6 months, we had enough proof points that they wanted to deploy our inline system. So then we had to suddenly, build a team, build this, a system that can actually go into a gigafactory, which has all of these sort of criteria and ridiculous GT&Cs, which is which we had to meet, right? Like they were expecting that we would provide service within 2 hours. They were expecting that our false negatives would be 0%. These are things that you expect from companies that are very mature installing equipment into, large gigafactories. And we had to scramble to do that. And that basically, once we got a large, order out of at the end of the bridge program. And that was the catalyst for us to raise more money from VCs. After that, we all, I think, know what happened with Northvolt. We had multiple orders, in the works with them, but they went through bankruptcy. But we had sort of built up our network across South Korea and Japan at that time, as well as some of the EV OEMs in the US. And so we were able to pivot and divert our resources to catering to new customers. With a lot of these customers, right, with the LGs and Samsungs, the tier ones in the world, these guys are making, very, very good products. They are looking for defects that are, 1 in 10 million, right? And it is very challenging, right? And in that process, as we got the ramp funding, we were essentially able to build, make a step change in our products, right? And in our algorithms, which we were then able to deploy and solve their problems, right? And that has gotten us through this journey, and that's where we are now.
Yeah, I mean, the open door at Davis, first save, second phase ramp, like that is the progression of the journey. And this is a guy that nearly died twice. You're looking at a ghost. Like, this is amazing. Like, this is why we have this programming, because it works. So Justin, I'd like you to talk a little bit in sort of a different thing, because these grants also catalyze a lot of hiring, a lot of job opportunity, a lot of hyper-local economic development opportunity. You're multiple time winner of publicly available grants, very competitive process, going after an extremely emissions intensive industrial heat business. But talk about building economic value here in California, hiring people in California because of this grant intervention.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first I would echo what you guys said, which is that there's no way Antora would be doing what we're doing today without the support of the EPIC program. It has been instrumental from day one. Several of us were in the Activate Fellowship, and something that is really personally important is that I have two co-founders, Andrew and David, and I had met Andrew prior to going into the Activate Fellowship, but we met David through the Activate Fellowship. And he just happened to be working on something really similar and thought about the world in similar ways. So we just started collaborating and joined forces. And so that collaboration was actually enabled by CEC support to the Activate Fellowship in the earliest days of the company. So we were born because of that support. And the support continued on. To your specific question about value in the state of California, because of the demonstrations we were able to make with the EPIC funding over the years, particularly the 305, the EPIC demo program, which was all about demonstrating the technology at full scale. We were able to raise over $300 million of private capital for the company. We have now stood up 2 different manufacturing facilities in the Bay Area, one of which is producing many gigawatt hours of batteries per year today. That's our current run rate. We've hired, I think, about 285 people onto the team overall. Almost 100 of those are manufacturing workforce that we've employed locally in San Jose. There's no way we could do that without the public support we've received. And all of that is in service of building very large commercial projects that we're currently deploying. We've got a bunch of projects that are in the pipeline, from construction, planning, development. And just to give a flavor for what the type of impact those projects are having, one that we're currently building right now that should be done in a few months, it's going to have a 4 megaton emissions impact. over the course. One project is going to have a 4 megaton CO2 reduction impact.
That's awesome.
Which is a staggering amount. And again, like that is because of the public support.
Are you going after cement? What's it in?
This is a fuels facility. They're producing renewable fuels.
That totally makes sense. Fantastic. You're looking at a clean economy unicorn, which is kind of special. But it's wonderful to hear these stories of the journey and how you're now employing 200 some odd people, 100 of those manufacturers in San Jose area. Like that to me is success. All those people are taxpayers. They now have good, high quality jobs doing the work we all want to do, right? So Epic Funds turns into jobs, turns into economic development. So now, Chris, to give you all context, this is a battery that doesn't have any critical minerals in it. Okay, so no lithium, et cetera. And it also does 800 to 500 hours of discharge. So imagine what that does to a distribution network, which is completely broken. Does a lot of good things. So Chris and I first met when you did Cal Seed. Is that right? Yeah. So it's been a long while and it's been a wonderful journey, but talk a little bit about your journey a lot and the multiple intervention points and how that helped with investors getting more comfortable, because we've heard about visibility. It raised me up. We've heard a little bit about how the access was very helpful. We've heard about economic development, but private capital is a critical part of building these businesses. So talk a little bit about your journey around those intervention points and how it really augmented these grants augmented those efforts.
Yeah, thanks, John. First, I'll also echo this, how critical the EPIC support has been for Noon, as probably evidenced in that, journey we had with several different grants. But I guess probably the good example for what you're talking about, John, is the bridge funding. I think that was just after the seed round. And in terms of this number that you've referenced earlier about the 10 to 1, we definitely did that for the between the bridge funding and then the Series A fundraise. So that was sort of the 10 to 1 type of number and 30 million-ish raised on the venture side. Other grants and awards as well from the DOE and NASA and so on in terms of sort of that full amount of funding. But definitely this investor side, showing basically accelerating or enabling in many cases the milestones that we need to do, the prototype systems I mentioned earlier to the larger demo systems, and then not only the investor side, but also the customer side, right? So now we have a lot more traction, some really large agreements coming together, sort of gigawatt scale things in the future. That's all because we can show these larger systems and having gone through those stages.
So just to be clear, you're deploying systems here in California at some time soon, is that right?
Yes, yeah. We have these modular containerized systems built, one commissioned and running at our facility, the other one built and awaiting permitting at a California site. Yeah.
In some part, that work was paid for by these grants.
Yes, directly. Yeah.
So you don't even get deployments without these things. I mean, energy is very, very hard. And it's not a software business. It actually, we need hardware out in the field, and it takes a long time to validate because the traditional energy buyers are extremely conservative. So getting this data in the field is essential to the next step. It's essential to each one of these people in their very different journeys. They've got to have evidence. They need to show, not tell. That's the rule in private equity. I don't believe you until you show me. So it's really nice to hear that there's that through line between all of you. So we're going to shift a little bit now. And this is sort of the moment where you get handed the magic wand. We are in a moment where we're looking at, as Californians, we're looking at what's next for the EPIC programming. And where did you see gaps that could be improved? Where did you see maybe dimensionally we were slightly off? Maybe the amount was wrong, or maybe the timing was wrong, or maybe it could be an administrator a little bit better. If we're going to put a wish list together to help the leaders of the CEC and the PUC decide, okay, we're going to design this for another 5 years, 10 years, whatever we design the programming for, how can it be improved? Because you've lived through multiple chances to participate in this process already. And I'm going to start with Justin to get some, what would have been improved in your experience? And looking forward, you're now at gigawatt scale. Is there a place for California to do a mini LPO, a green bank, right? In terms of where do we stop? Maybe we never stop with municipal involvement.
Yeah, great question. So as far as historically, what could have been improved, I think one vehicle that would be really valuable is first of a kind project financing. For these very large projects, we're going out and working with third party equity investors that invest in the project, not in Antora, but in the project. And they take on risk because it's a first of a kind deployment or a second of a kind deployment. So we've been really fortunate to work with some amazing capital providers that were in for that type of risk, but it was a long, hard journey to convince them to do that. So I think if the state of California had a program that was focused on that and funding these significantly larger check sizes for big projects that have a big emissions impact, I think that would be hugely valuable.
Let me just pause for a second and ask you a very specific question. Is that an insurance product by the state?
Great question. It could be an insurance product. It doesn't have to be. That could take the form of a direct project equity investment. It could take the form of project debt. It could be a loan guarantee like LPO. It could even be other financial instruments. For example, one project we're building is requiring us to build about $25 million worth of electrical hardware. So think electrical substation, transmission lines to bring power from local renewables, which are not far away, to the manufacturing facility where we're deploying our thermal batteries. The build out of that line is totally straightforward for the independent power producer and utility partners we work with, but it costs money up front. And so Antora right now has to figure out a way to basically back that. That infrastructure gets paid off when the project operates and create cash flows, but upfront, these are risk averse parties. They need some assurance that that's not just going to turn into nothing. So basically creating some sort of letter of credit or surety bond type vehicle would be another mechanism that would be very valuable.
Right. I think we're going to have to strike one of those options from the list, which is equity participation in SPVs by the municipal partner, just because it gets way too crazy complicated. But I like the three suggestions you've made, which is a backstop of some sort, an insurance product, or potentially some sort of revolving debt or pre-development dollars that end up rolling out of the capital stack as you achieve those goals in performance or in execution, whatever it might be. Three great suggestions, and I hope you wrote them down. Okay, good.
One more, this is forward looking. So that's sort of what would have been helpful over the last year. If I look to the next year or two, something that really stands out to us is, I mentioned the scale of projects we're building right now. These are multi-gigawatt hour projects. These are multi-megaton scale impact. California on the fundamentals is a wonderful place to build these, particularly because the solar resource is so good here. So that it's like perfect fundamentals. But none of our late stage projects are in California right now. And that's because there are charges on the electricity bill of industrials that basically make it uneconomic for them to do this, even though there's plenty of hours of the day when solar is overproducing in California. We're spilling solar. There's excess solar. There's nothing to
negative pricing.
Exactly. So we could easily soak that up and use it to charge our thermal batteries and then deliver that as industrial process energy to manufacturers. But we can't do that right now because there's about $30 per megawatt hour of additional public purpose charges added to electricity bills, which are not on gas bills. The equivalent number for gas is about $3 to $6. So roughly an order of magnitude difference there. So if we were somehow able to bring those to parity, then we would be able to electrify heavy industry much more rapidly in this state.
Okay, we're going to have to operationalize rate structure redevelopment. That is a big ask, I'll tell you that. But I assume that the CPUC is here and they can handle that kind of thing. So rate structure. All right, I got it. You're up.
Yeah, I think what we've seen is over the last 10 years or so, there have been a lot of battery startups in the Bay Area, in California in general. And the struggle has always been to scale up. And this is true of the world over, right? Like there are people trying to scale up battery manufacturing across the world, but very few have been successful. They've all sort of pivoted to a different model, or they've gone out of business. We've seen what happened with Natron, and we are seeing what happened with our Next Energy. We've seen this with QuantumScape that they've been trying to scale for a very long time. Scaling is really hard. And what we are seeing is that there is no centralized hub where folks can essentially come in and do testing of their cells at the right scales, right? So what will be really helpful looking forward is if there was a facility within California that startup companies could go to in order to scale their materials, their cell designs, their modules and final products, right? So I think that is something that is a big piece that is missing right now. There's a lot of infrastructure in order to provide these companies with like capital or technology pathways, but there's no centralized knowledge sharing center or a scale up facility where they can at low risk prove out their technologies that can be scaled.
Okay, so I'll summarize what I just heard, which is a energy storage manufacturing innovation center that's kind of bring your idea and we'll try and build 300 of them. Okay, all right, that's a decent idea. Take note. All right, I'm going to go back to Chris. What were some of the challenges in the programming that you worked on? I mean, with grant stuff, et cetera. Maybe one or two things that might have been improved, but going forward, looking at the next phase or next chapter of EPIC, what do you see as helpful? Because you're getting into deployments, you're sort of just right behind Justin in this moment where you're getting deployments, Vince is getting deployments, he's doing analysis on scaled lines in Korea, et cetera. So how would it help you going forward with grants or municipal involvement?
Great. I'll be very concise because I saw the 1 minute sign over here a minute ago. So,
hi, 1 minute. Oh my gosh!
But no worry. So yes, not focusing too much on the past. I think we've had quite excellent support. I don't want to kind of point any critiques and gaps there, but the future, as you mentioned. So we are gearing up both for pilot manufacturing and this first or second of a kind type projects that Justin mentioned. So pilot manufacturing side, there is RAMP, which we've heard about. I don't know if it's sort of large enough. We'll look into that. This could be a really excellent match for us. And then maybe echoing what Justin mentioned there, as we get to some larger projects, there's going to be ways to finance those. We're already looking into, and that could be.
You're in a very good position for RAMP. I agree with you. Vince, what can we do looking forward? Because we're now over time, apparently.
Yeah, I would say a lot of great ideas already shared. I think I'd love to see tighter coordination with the venture ecosystem, especially as relates to match funding. I think we were a little naive when we first came into the process and thought, oh, we just won this really competitive solicitation, 1 out of 4 out of like 100 applicants, surely this will position us well with the venture community. It seemed to fall on deaf ears. I'd love to see, it's not going to be a fit for every VC, especially for those that are maybe more hardware averse due to its CapEx intensity. But I think if there are those that are more mission aligned with the stated policy objectives of the CEC, it might be really helpful to have, almost like you're pre-vetted if you win, and then you unlock some sort of additional funding that's waiting for you. We ended up finding other sources, thankfully, but I know various other friends that weren't able to do so necessarily.
So we can look to something like third derivative for, pooled CVC dollars or pooled venture dollars that are sort of automatically triggered when you win a grant kind of thing. Makes sense. Lindsay, you heard that? Ecosystem development with investor community. Fantastic. I've got one, which I'll give you as a final note, which is the time it takes for Treasury to do reimbursements is way too long. It is way out of sync with entrepreneur time. And so you have folks that are spending dollars, grant dollars against a budget, and then they wait 90 days, end of month to get the reimbursement. Cash is king at this point in these businesses. So I would strongly encourage, a tighter relation between those two parties so that we can actually get the wheel spinning much faster, much sooner. Okay, so the valleys of death, we have great achievers here. EPIC is critical. Call your constituents and tell them to expand this program.
Thank you so much, John, and our panelists. That was a terrific last plenary to end on. Feel free to go ahead and migrate off the stage at this time. You all are yeah. Okay. At this time, before we head into closing remarks, I promise we're not going to hold you too much longer. We have a very quick post-event survey that is available to the staff. This year was our second year putting this event on in the auditorium, and hopefully, if those of you who are returning saw better registration lines, the availability of lunch, music in the hall. Every little bit of feedback helps to make this program, this event better. And I said it my first year that I put on this event, EPIC is only as good as the projects in it. We would not be here without you all as entrepreneurs, as researchers. Our success is your success. Your success is our success. And so on that note, just really wanted to thank everyone. Take a quick moment, scan that. Most of it's multiple choice, should be quick to fill out. But then with that, maybe I'll take 30 seconds just so that folks can at least queue it up on their phones. But otherwise, I would like to invite the Director of the Energy Research and Development Division, Jonas Steinbeck, to provide our closing remarks.
All right, thanks, Fritz. Thanks so much to our wonderful speakers in that last session and throughout the day for sharing their insights and great ideas to inform future work. Appreciate all of the brainstorming in real time and from your deep experience, having gone through the process, that's really valuable. Thanks so much to our Utility Symposium and EPIC partners, PG&E, SCE, and SDG&E, to the Public Utilities Commission, several representatives here. Yeah, just really appreciate your support of this event and the partnership, that's been ongoing for more than a decade. We're really fortunate to have such an impactful R&D program as part of our energy landscape here in California. Just a few kind of takeaways or highlights from the sessions. From the living room chat, we heard about how California is really a lab for innovation, and EPIC is an important component of that story. We heard about the importance of conducting policy relevant research. We heard that from Commissioner Douglas. And how EPIC can help advance, important set of resources from enhanced geothermal to long duration energy storage to thermal batteries, among others. In the affordability session, we heard about how equity really requires customized solutions, understanding really those needs of those who otherwise can't access that technology, and bringing customized solutions. And we also heard about how EPIC funded tools like the Build It Green decision support tool is helping homeowners electrify and avoid some of the upfront costs like electrical panel upgrades. And then in the battery session, we heard about how innovative components and new manufacturing processes like Sonacharge's acoustic wave technology are helping to make batteries safer and more durable. Just a few notes on kind of what EPIC has accomplished, which to Fritz's point is really a collective effort. All the recipients, the interagency collaboration all enables this. So we've supported over 500 projects to date through the CEC part of EPIC. That includes, all the wonderful technologies and firms that you've heard from today. Gradient was out at the tech showcase. So that's, new heat pump technology for, these window-based systems, expanding access to space heating and cooling. We've got groups like Rejoule and Smartville that are advancing the repurposing of EV batteries into stationary storage. 12 is turning waste CO2 into useful products and fuels. So many exciting examples, reflected in the panels today, in the exhibits, and the videos, which were really great to see as well. We've commercialized over 70 technologies now. Includes hardware and software solutions, and those are delivering affordability and other ratepayer benefits. And many other technologies are moving through that tech innovation pipeline. We've invested $1.4 billion of public investment, and that has catalyzed now actually $19 billion of private follow-on investment. So it's up to a 13-fold amplification effect. It grows every year. It was 10 just recently, and now it's up to 13. So just really underscores the importance of public investment in catalyzing the energy economy and delivering all these important benefits and including to ratepayers. And then finally, I'll just note, we're really advancing an inclusive approach in terms of program implementation, moving towards a clean energy economy for all. And that includes under EPIC, for example, 60% of the demonstration funds being directed towards justice communities, $345 million. And then looking ahead, we're going to be having some workshops with CPUC very shortly and the other EPIC administrators. So looking forward to that next 5-year window to support the next generation of impactful and creative solutions. So with that, I just want to thank those that made the symposium possible, the leads and the contributors. That includes the CEC media team, the building staff, contributors from across the CEC, and our symposium leads, Fritz Fu, Rachel Salazar, Adam Gottlieb, Rebecca Aviles, and Kemi Peterson. So I'll pass it back to Fritz for the final word, but please join me in thanking our symposium leads and contributors.
All right, congratulations, everyone. You made it to the finish line. Take a deep breath. I just wanted to take a very quick second just also to reiterate Jonah's thanks. This really would not have been possible without the folks in our IT business services helping put the chairs out and the tables, our volunteers within our division, John for helping sponsor it. Again, every year we're trying to do something better. Also wanted some specific shout outs to media office, Michael Ward, Susie Speckman, Sandy Louie, Rick Macias, and the graphics team. These shiny banners were all new and very proud to display them and show them this year and have at least 5 more years to use them, hopefully more. And yeah, last but not least, I really encourage you all to continue these conversations today. There are a number of restaurants and bars nearby Sacramento. And so if as you're heading out the door and are having a conversation with someone, there are so many just within a few blocks away. Feel free to stop by and continue these conversations and make those connections. With that, safe travels, head home. We'll see you next year to celebrate more successes. Thanks, everyone.